Good morning. Commissioners, Chief Moore, Mr. Tiefank, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. It is 9:30 a.m. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Please let the record reflect that Commissioners Suthers, Shields, Briggs, Kalanche are present, and we have a quorum. Mr. President?
Thank you. We welcome everyone attending this morning. The Police Commission is committed to ensuring equal access to its meetings. It is requested that individuals who require the services of a translator contact the board secretary no later than the day preceding the meeting. Whenever possible, a translator will be provided. Sign language interpreters, assistive listening devices, or other auxiliary aids and/or services may be provided upon request. To ensure availability, you are advised to make your request at least 72 hours prior to the meeting you wish to attend. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. The order of speakers will be a speaker in the room will go first, then we will take a speaker watching today's meeting on Zoom. We will alternate between speakers in the room and Zoom for a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board, so you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting in several ways outlined on the agenda. Message for those attending in person. These meetings are regular meetings between the board, the department, and key stakeholders. Meetings of the Board of Police Commissioners are open to the public. The state's Ralph M. Brown Act affords the public the opportunity to be present at the meetings, hear the presentations and dialogue in real time, and provide feedback via the public comment period. During these meetings, there is a need for the board to carry out public business expeditiously without delays or disruptions. Members of the audience shall not engage in any conduct which causes an actual disruption of the meeting. Those attending in person are reminded that disruptive behavior will be a cause for removal. If you disrupt this meeting, you will be provided with only one warning to cease disruptive behavior. If you fail to cease such behavior, you will be removed from the meeting. While in the boardroom, members of the audience must be seated. Standing is not permitted. At this time, we will move to item number 1, the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioner President Suthers, Vice President Shields, Commissioner Briggs, Commissioner Kalanche, Commissioner Garcia, Mr. Inspector General, Mr. Tiefank, and Mr. City Attorney. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update. I'm going to first address our some force investigations involving first an officer-involved shooting that did not involve a hit that occurred on February 16th at approximately 7:50 in the morning, where Foothill Division police officers, uniform officers, responded to a radio call of a restraining order violation in the 13200 block of Paxton Street. The comments of the radio call indicated that the person reporting had a restraining order against her husband and that he was currently at the location. Once the officers arrived, they met with a witness that was in the front yard who directed the officers to the back house that was on the property. There, the officers met with the person reporting who confirmed that, in fact, the individual was inside the residence. The officers approached the front door of this property and asked the suspect, the individual, to step out of the location. He refused. The officers verbalized with him for several minutes before making entry. When the officers attempted to detain the individual, a physical struggle ensued. During that struggle, the individual, later identified as Pete Garcia, male Hispanic, 52 years of age, produced a pistol from his front waistband area and pointed it at the officer's direction. Simultaneously, one of the officers tased the suspect. Mr. Garcia then fired one round from his pistol at the officers, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. Mr. Garcia was not struck by the officer's gunfire. He was brought down to a bed where he was taken into custody without further incident. He was transported by rescue ambulance where he was treated for an unrelated medical issue. The firearm that was possessed by Mr. Garcia was later determined to be a polymer pistol, was commonly known as a ghost gun. It was recovered at the scene and is booked as evidence. The officer that was involved in the shooting was transported to a nearby hospital where he was treated for an injury to his left hand that he sustained during this incident, and fortunately he was later released. No other community members were injured as a result of this incident. Our investigation to this point indicates that the injury to the officer's hand was a result of the round that was fired by the suspect. Force Investigation Division investigators responded, as did the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, where they'll conduct this investigation, as well as members of the Office of the Inspector General were present as well. On the second event was a canine contact that resulted in a hospitalization that occurred on the 17th of February at approximately 1 in the afternoon. Wilshire Division uniform officers were patrolling the area of San Vicente Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue when their automatic license plate reader alerted them to a stolen vehicle. The officers observed the stolen vehicle traveling east on San Vicente and began following it. It was being driven by a male driver, later identified as Ian Jimenez, a male Hispanic, 21 years of age. The officers confirmed the vehicle was stolen and requested a backup. Mr. Jimenez abruptly accelerated away at a high rate of speed. A vehicle pursuit ensued, but quickly terminated when Jimenez collided with an occupied vehicle, causing minor injuries to that occupant. Mr. Jimenez exited the vehicle and fled on foot to the adjacent neighborhood. The officers established a perimeter, and canine officers responded to the location and conducted a search. After a brief search, Mr. Jimenez was discovered exiting the rear door of a residence at the 1200 block of Maslin Avenue, where a canine contact occurred. This residence did not belong to Mr. Jimenez, and in fact, he broke in that residence in an effort to escape the officers. During that contact, Mr. Jimenez wrestled with the canine, refusing to surrender, and he then again fled on foot. He was tracked by the airship to a second location where he was taken into custody by a second canine search team. Mr. Jimenez was transported by a rescue ambulance to a nearby hospital where he was treated for injuries related to the canine contact to his left forearm, right ankle, and he was cleared for booking. Now, 2 days later, Mr. Jimenez was transported from the Metropolitan Detention Center to a nearby hospital for a reevaluation of an injury to his left arm, where during that subsequent examination, he was hospitalized for that injury. Given his hospitalization following this canine contact, this fits the criteria of a categorical use of force. The Force Investigation Division responded to this and are conducting their investigation. No officers were injured and no other community members were injured. Mr. Jimenez was booked for felony evading and is also, the department is pursuing charges for burglary of those now two residences. There was actually a second residence that he broke into as well in his effort to escape from the officers. Lastly, there was an officer-involved shooting involving no hits that occurred on the 20th of February at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. Central Patrol uniform officers responded to a radio call of an assault with a deadly weapon suspect at the 400 block of East 5th Street. There's an apartment complex there. The comments of the call indicated that the suspect, later identified as Anthony Franks, a male, white, 42 years of age, had threatened his neighbors with a gun. Once the officers arrived, the person reporting informed the officers that Mr. Frank pointed the gun at her. During this brief interaction, Frank emerged from a doorway of an apartment that was in the same hallway with what appeared to be a pistol. Frank pointed and fired the weapon at the officers, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. Mr. Frank was not struck by the officer's gunfire and immediately retreated back into his apartment. Officers broadcasted a shots fired, officer needs help call, and additional officers responded to the scene. After a brief standoff, telephonic contact was made with Mr. Franks, and he was taken into custody when he surrendered. A weapon with the appearance of a semi-automatic pistol capable of firing 50 caliber rubber balls and a jar of similar ammunition or munitions was recovered at the scene. Additionally, a Smith & Wesson 9mm semi-automatic handgun was also recovered from Mr. Frank's apartment. All these items are being booked into evidence. There was no community members injured nor officers. Mr. Frank was booked for assault with a deadly weapon, not a firearm, as a result of this event. With these reports, we now stand at 5 officer-involved shootings for the year. Our number last year was 5. Our 4-year average is just over 4. There have been one fatal officer-involved shooting this year. That number last year was 3. Our 4-year average is just over 1. In reporting our crime statistics, I'm happy to report that we continue to see an overall reduction in violent crime as well as property crime, with an overall Part 1 reduction of a 7.4% reduction. The challenge that we have on this first, particularly in the month of February, has been an increase in homicides and shooting violence. We stand at 47 homicides year to date versus 40 last year. As far as our shooting victims, we had 189 shooting victims this year. That number was 174 last year. The department's following closely the instances of where these are occurring. We have seen an increase in gang-related street violence between opposing factions within our neighborhoods, and we're working closely with our gang reduction youth development outreach and intervention workers in an effort to quell the disputes and also overcome rumors in an effort to see that this violence does not continue. We've also added patrols in those areas, particularly in the hours in which we've seen these shootings occur. And our homicide detectives continue to work these cases, and I'm fortunate to say that they're solving many of them, which is also helping us stem further acts of violence. Our personnel strength, as I move to that, there's been no change. We have 8,915 sworn members of the organization. That's 378 below our authorized limit. Our civilian professional strength stand at 2,644. That's 254 members below our authorized strength. There's 443 reserve officers. Finally, with my retirement at the end of this week, this will be my last Board of Police Commissioners meeting. Thank you. It has been my distinct honor and privilege to have served for more than 4 decades on what I feel is the finest police department in the world, and for the last 5 years as its chief. The goals when I began my tenure as chief of police remain as relevant today as they did then. Build on the success of my predecessors, Chief Charlie Beck and Bill Bratton, in bolstering public trust, lowering crime, modernizing our technology, and addressing the most pressing concerns of our people, fairness in our disciplinary system and promotions, and modernizing our technology. No one could have imagined what our city and this department would face over the last 5 years, with an unprecedented combination of challenges and crises unmatched in our lifetime. I'm proud of my leadership and service over the course of this arduous time. More importantly, our people rose to each of these occasions and demonstrated professionalism, grace, and grit. During my tenure, I'm also confident our work saw successes across a broad spectrum of topics, unmatched by any other law enforcement agency across this country. From re-engineering our organization to meet the needs of our community while enduring a historic reduction in personnel, to striving to build and bolster community trust, implementing reforms including the expansion of the renowned Community Safety Partnership Initiative and community engagement strategies. Our work under the leadership of this Board of Police Commissioners and the use of force policy reforms and de-escalation of force, state-of-the-art training and new tools with the support of the Los Angeles Police Foundation, to pursuing the expansion of alternative services, to deepening the diversity of our workforce by investing in the development of our people, resulting in appointments of a variety of firsts in positions across this organization. Each of these accomplishments were the results of an incredible team of dedicated professionals who similarly believe there is no finer law enforcement agency in the world better capable of meeting each moment. To those who believed in me, to those who were patient and good counsel, to those who allowed me in their lives, and to my critics. While it may not have always seemed at the time, each of you have had an impact in my life, and I'm grateful. Over this last year, Mayor Bass has accomplished much in her first year in office, including unprecedented support for this department to rebuild its staffing and provide critical resources needed to make this a safer city. Over this last year, our city has experienced a significant reduction in violent crime, building on the success we saw the year before, particularly in homicides and crimes involving houseless individuals. Our work in bolstering public trust has shown back-to-back marked increases from the years earlier, and many other strategic initiatives are hitting their stride. Over the last half of the year, recruitment is improving, and we're retaining more of our young officers who previously had been lost to other agencies. I congratulate this board again for your thoughtful choice of Don McChoy as the interim chief of police. As I said earlier, he's an outstanding leader, a team builder, a communicator, and is well equipped to move this organization forward. Now this board and Mayor Bass embarks on your charter responsibilities to search and identify the next chief of police for this great department, who will lead this department through the World Cup and the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games. I'm encouraged by the mayor's thoughtful approach, recognizing that search should be nationwide and comprehensive, while also recognizing the amazing talented leaders that within this organization itself. That process, I know, will involve many voices and considerations and will not be done overnight. To the people of Los Angeles, thank you for the partnership, the support, and the encouragement. To every member of this department, I'm proud of you and the work you do each day in protecting and serving the people of this great city. I have traveled the world in this great country and hold with every certainty there is no one better. Many challenges and difficulties remain, but your work in these past years, in the most trying circumstances, has been remarkable, and I'm grateful for having the opportunity to tell your story. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to serve as your chief, and I will forever cherish the challenges and successes while enjoying that time, also remembering the loss of those who have served this city. This completes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And again, I'd like to begin by thanking you for your 43 years of service. As you mentioned, we've got some incredible events coming up. We've got some incredible challenges ahead, most importantly, identifying your successor. I'd like to commend you for the crime reduction initiatives that you engaged during your tenure as chief. You institutionalized the community safety partnership model, and I got to see an example of that last week when I attended the Elgin Sutton community meeting last week, along with Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson, where the community there is asking for a similar program in their neighborhood. Your ongoing modernization of the department's technology, as well as a focus on increasing the ranks of our women in positions of the command staff, are certainly notable. And you served at a time during a pandemic and other challenges that the country was facing that was extremely difficult, and you did it without flinching. Before I finish, I'd like to say that I'm going to finish this. Whether you're here to hear the rest of it is up to you. I'd like to commend you for your winning during your career the Meritorious Service Medal, the Police Star, and most importantly, the Medal of Valor. Certainly an exceptional career. You're an exceptional individual. I look forward to continuing to communicate with you as you depart. And we're not going to say goodbye, we're just going to say farewell. And with that, I'm going to move over to my fellow commissioners for their comments. I'll start with Commissioner Kalanche.
I just want to reiterate a congratulations and a thank you for all of your years of service and commitment to the City of LA. For me, when I joined the commission, things that were important to me were promoting women and diversity and accountability and commitment to community. And I feel that you have worked closely with this commission to ensure that those goals have been met. As you leave many women in key positions. So the future of this department will definitely have females in key positions as we move towards a new LAPD. I shared this with you one-on-one, but I do want to say that as part of our role and your role is to ensure accountability and oversight. And I want to say that folks don't see all the deliberation and all the reading and research that goes into each categorical use of force. And I've learned a lot from you, and I've also seen in person your thoughtfulness and how you advocate not only for officers in a balanced way, but you advocate for the community so that all use of force is deliberated and decided. Whatever the outcome is decided in a fair manner that does take into account the job, but also the commitment that we have to service. So I just want to thank you for your balanced and very informative participation and working with us to ensure accountability, but that it's also lifting up, the job of, the difficult job of law enforcement. So with that, I just want to, wish you all the best and congratulate you on all your service and your commitment to the city. And it was a pleasure working with you this last 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Calanche. Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, President Suthers. This morning, I want to pay tribute to an outstanding Chief of Police, Michael Moore. It has been both an honor, privilege, and pleasure working with you these past 3.5 years. Today is your last day to address the commission. And Chief Moore has served this city, this department, for 43 years, 5 of which were as Chief of Police. And I want to commend you for that, sir. Since my appointment to the commission in 2020, Chief Moore has partnered with me to bring about needed reforms to the department that helped our city in the wake of the civil unrest in 2020. We worked together to revise the protectual stop rules. We worked together to bring the ABLE program to the LAPD. We worked together to ensure that the department is inclusive, and that is something that will continue. I'm not unmindful of the challenges that Chief Moore has faced during his tenure as chief. It was a tough job leading more than 10,000 people in this city. He has to endure a high level of criticism from multiple sources, all of whom second guess his decision, some of whom hurl personal vitriol attacks at him. Notwithstanding those attacks, he has withstood them and continued to provide the type of leadership that our city requires. It is a constant struggle in any organization, this department in particular, to separate gossip from fact, particularly when multiple sources traffic gossip and masquerade it as fact. But the chief was able to do so and steer this department through stormy weather on each occasion, and I was a witness to that. Despite Chief Moore's challenges, he kept the citizens of Los Angeles safe. He served the community in Los Angeles, and he disregarded none. I think that I speak for the entire commission when I thank Chief Moore for his leadership and service. I've said this before, and it bears repeating. Because of Chief Moore, the LAPD is a leader in law enforcement, and its policies are some of the most progressive in American policing today. So as you go about your plans for retirement, sir, I want to remind Chief Moore that there are those of us in this city who appreciate everything that you have done for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. Vice President Shields.
Thank you, President Suthers. First, a question for the chief about the report that you provided. Given that there were 2 different groups of officers who were essentially shot at this last week, what type of support is provided to them given kind of this event?
So individually, they meet immediately with behavioral service sciences individuals. These are police psychologists for debriefing. They actually also have support by their commanding officers. I will, on the occasion in Foothill, reached out specifically to those officers, the officer that was injured, as well as his partner. I was grateful that they survived that deadly encounter. I've seen the video. We are moving those videos up to release them earlier. That was a deadly encounter that, by the grace of God, an officer was not shot and killed. So that emotional support is there. The follow-up is monitoring, evaluating, ensuring they're getting sleep, rest. They're not in the workplace at this point. We want to give them time and distance to recognize these type of deadly encounters and obviously the natural reaction of just understanding how close it came to potentially them losing their life, and being ready to come back and face the demands of this profession. Once they come back, we'll continue to work with them to see when is appropriate for them to go back into the field, and we'll give them as much time and distance as they ask for that. This also involves peer support. They have partners and friends that also embrace and surround them with care and support. So this is something we're very mindful of, and we also recognize that much like a burn or an injury that you significantly achieve, that it manifests itself in different ways with different people and over time also. So this is a support network that will continue in the months ahead.
Thank you, Chief. And it's good to hear all of the support that they're being provided, given these deadly encounters where they still had the restraint to take these individuals into custody without any additional individuals getting harmed. So thank you for that. And I too want to echo in this group of congratulating you on your decades and decades of service. You've proudly served the city of Los Angeles and the people of Los Angeles for over 40 years. And you really led this department during very tumultuous times, including the unprecedented pandemic and the civil unrest arising from the murder of George Floyd, which challenged policing as we know it. Thank you for your leadership and for continuously pushing the department to move forward, and your commitment to continuous improvement, also while having us pause and recognize how far the department has come over the last few decades, and really appreciate the professionalism of this department. You have not hesitated to call out and recognize when conduct has fallen short of expectations, but you also remind us on a daily basis that the vast majority of men and women put on the uniform honorably and serve the public with respect and dignity on a daily basis. So I, as a commissioner, have really appreciated that balance that you bring. And you, from my experience, you've really demonstrated great respect for this commission and the role of this commission in civilian oversight, and you've welcomed civilian oversight. And I think we take that for granted here in the city of Los Angeles, because that is not something that is welcome or commonplace in other parts of the country. So I appreciate that. I think you are a respected leader, not only in this city, but throughout the nation and internationally among police chiefs. And, both the city and the profession of policing is greatly indebted for your service. So thank you, Chief. Congratulations on your retirement. We will miss you.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you. Good morning. So, Chief, to piggyback a little bit on the question in terms of officer sort of recovery and the mental health offerings that are available, this past week I was having a conversation with the leaders over in Valley Bureau about the options available to their families and their partners, and really looking at exploring what are the ways that the folks that they go home to can support them and really have them gain an understanding of what a trauma recovery pathway could look like. And so they shared a little bit about what they're doing. Can you share a little bit about formally what are the spaces, and then maybe creatively what are the spaces that can be available?
So two things, certainly, and we recognize that the stability, the readiness, the resilience of an officer, any member of this organization, myself included, is a direct reflection of our families, of those people we have at home who care for us and we go home to. So it is a critical element within our services and outreach in these times of crisis, as well as just in the day-to-day work of stress and turmoil that officers and personnel will come across, is to recognize the role of the family unit, and to offer services and support for them. An area that we've had particular challenges in has been with children. Children of officers that have had, whether it be deadly encounters or they be some type of injury or crisis, or just the in years past the amount of hate and vitriol that was going against law enforcement as a profession. I am grateful that most recently in this last year, we've identified an organization that provides services for children and family members, youth, that are certified and trained specifically in that area, and we're now offering those services on a more routine basis. Previously, it was kind of a stopgap measure working with through the employees' medical systems, as well as what the community could offer for support. But that's become strengthened through this nonprofit organization. We now are, and they're serving not just us, but also fire and their families, recognizing that first responders also will at times have these type of life and death encounters. You saw the engine explosion that happened just last week. And last week we had the horrific collision involving the death of a 14-year-old young girl that officers attempted to rescue. And so that emotional support is something that happens both with the command officers through the chain of command, their peers, and then formally through behavioral sciences. For instance, in addition to that, it's an evolutionary process, just as we've added the services now more formal for children. About 5 years ago, we started that any officer who encounters a death, for instance, like in a fatal traffic collision, will also be afforded those services as the rigors, meaning not voluntarily, but will actually assign it to remove any stigma associated or could be associated. I see the evolution of policing. We're in a much better place today than we were as a culture 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And we see our officers are, one of the first things they're seeking is that emotional support, that the insight, the guidance from professionals to help them as they recover and work through the trauma that they've been exposed to.
Thank you, Chief. Also, congratulations on your retirement and on your 43 years with LAPD. You've been a leader to the city, not just the department, and like everybody has mentioned during these times that no one saw coming. Right, these times there's overlap of issues that occurred in the last couple of years, and you handle it despite the political pressures, despite the community pressures, or in partnership with the community pressures. And so I appreciate that. Also appreciate you being a champion for what you just said, right? Like supporting Dr. Dory and his team in the mental health and wellness for the officers, and as folks has mentioned, for CSP and really pushing for, to use your word, the cultural shift in certain spaces in the department, and especially so in community policing and relational policing. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. With that, we will move to agenda item number 2, public comment. Madam Secretary, please call the first speaker.
The first speaker is Jonathan Foster.
Hello, Jonathan Foster. Here's one.
Madam Secretary.
Oh, shoot.
Madam Secretary, please call the next witness. Next speaker.
Yeah, but there was also this one.
We have these closed sessions, and during the closed sessions, there's no secret that we adjudicate cases.
Some means. So it's kind of funny. You said there was a witness, and I know you're courtroom aware. The LAPD and the commission, when an officer is factually found out of policy, they're still not prosecuted. And even findings by the chief or the commissioners are questionable by that it seems like all decisions should be unanimous. And we're speaking about the past because none of you were here on some very questionable shootings and killings and stuff. that should be unanimous but are not, the decisions, and this calls into question the motive of the commissioners too, because they feel, even though the law says, or the LAPD handbook says that an officer was to conduct themselves a certain way, the commissioner, find that it was just too hard for the officer. And so I, the commissioner, find that the officer is not out of policy when really it's just a way to protect the officer, to falsely block an officer from prosecution. In fact, the officer has committed murder, but it doesn't get prosecuted, and that's a crime. The commissioner has a way to cover up their intention. A jury is 12. So the commission shouldn't be any number any different than a standard jury of 12. Then I looked up grand jury is 23 jurors and is what the commission should be, 23 commissioners, because you are, as Soberoff said, adjudicating cases. And this is to give the public or impacted families the same maximum potential for an accurate adjudication of the stated officer's actions. An adjudication is not supposed to be or give someone the ability that because you, the commissioner, feel a certain way can go against stated law when stated laws established by someone who was elected, right? The commission does not have the right to change the law or disregard the law or then disagree with the law and vote against the established law because you feel like that's what should take place. You don't have that ability. And you did that on several occasions, or this commission, not you five, but this commission did that on several cases.
Thank you.
Next, we have Betty Lay.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
Agenda items, chief report, and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, first off, with the agenda items, I support 3C, B, D, and I totally agree on 3G that it should be corrected and show the increase. For Chief's report, I totally appreciate the last 5 years. For Chief Moore's report, he knows it's very bittersweet for me, but I also understand, and I wish him and Cindy well on their new journey. And for public comment, I'm sure that interim Chief Choi will be listening, or at least listening to the recording. And it was great seeing you twice in the last 3 weeks. And the same with Richard T. Fink, that it was great seeing you too for the twice in the last 3 weeks. With that, I hope everybody stays healthy and we'll stay in touch, Michael. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
The next speaker, please, Andrew Gravener.
All right, starting off with the chief's report. That should be limited to 3 minutes, regardless of who the chief is. The chief's not special. If the chief needs more time, we should get more time. Good riddance to the chief. Goodbye. We know you're not retiring. You were fired. You're just retiring because you don't want to be on record that you were fired. Yeah. I mean, this is the guy who was getting the retirement payments the entire time he was chief, even though he wasn't retired. You know, that one incident, why did you even bring the dogs in? Like, what are the dogs supposed to do in that situation? Just attack people? I mean, like what's the point of having the dogs for that particular incident? You know, just using dogs as attack, animals when the dogs are, it's abusive to the dogs because the dogs are just cute, fun companions who want to just have a loving family, and instead they're being forced to work for you fuckers. Let's see. We have the agenda items. We have a advertising for bail, serve bail fund bonds in the jails. Why don't we just eliminate Why don't you just eliminate cash bail? We have a donation from the Police Foundation. This is for, let's see, the Police for promotional items. We have, this is the challenge coins for foreign dignitaries. No on that. We have donations for the IT Bureau. Let's see. We have that's more challenge coins, coffee mugs, sling bags, stuffed animals. Giving out like police vests, teddy bears to kids. No on that. We have the Cesar Chavez Appreciation Brunch. You all are very anti-labor, and the police are sent in to try to crush labor movements. So you can't claim the honor of Cesar Chavez. We have the chief, getting more expensive vacations on taxpayer dollars. Oh, and I see that you accidentally, you're so eager to pay Choi so much money that you accidentally decided to pay him more than you were legally allowed to.
Next, we have Jamie Cusick.
All items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
All right, first I'll talk about items 3E and 3F, the former fired Chief Moore's personal expense reports. Are you kidding me? You all really went ahead and spent over $3,000 of our taxpayer dollars to send someone who is no longer a police chief to 2 different police chief association meetings? Both of those meetings occurred weeks after he said he was stepping down. Like, is this a fucking joke? How can you justify his presence there? Those $3,000 could have been spent to house people, to feed people, to provide medical care, to do any number of things besides gift this murderer with 2 separate winter vacations, North Carolina and Orlando. Moving on to 3A, on this agreement you're proposing with the DBA Jail Advertising Network for bail bond signboard advertising. First of all, money bail not only overtly criminalizes poverty, it is also inherently unconstitutional because it violates rights to due process. There is no reason we shouldn't abolish cash bail altogether, as Andrew pointed out, and as the state of Illinois did last year to enormous success. And secondly, can I just say that it is so fucking revolting that you're advertising that people should be sent to jail in the first place. Like, every time I think this department can't enrage and disgust me any further, it always ends up exceeding my expectations. And then finally, on item 4A, regarding the procedure utilized by the communications division to triage calls for service, including those that qualify an alternative unarmed response. On that, I'll just say that even as a white person, I know better than to ever call 911 within LA city limits or county limits for any reason at all, because of the risk that cops could potentially be sent to my apartment. There is literally no medical emergency that could be more life-threatening than the prospect of simply bringing LAPD onto my street. The risk is just too probable that they'd open fire on my unhoused neighbors or my housed neighbors or my roommate or even me if I happen to be holding a plastic fork at the time. Meanwhile, though, this comment is necessarily underinformed because due to the rules of this dystopic meeting, I have to provide comment before I hear the department's presentation on that item. What the hell? We should all be allowed to talk for as long as we need to after each and every agenda item. The fact that we aren't is just further proof that this meeting is designed to quell the voices of the citizens it's supposed to broadcast. This meeting is a sham. This commission is a sham. Fuck the police. Abolish LAPD. I'll yield the rest of my time.
The next speaker, the Red Chief Hunt.
Well, Michael Moore, thank you. I've been arrested 96 times. Thank you for the $270,000 when you was police of the West Bureau for the Venice stuff. Thank you for the $215,000, making me the highest paid activist in the country due to LAPD and the city attorney. But most of all, here's what I really don't get is that you're the chief of police and you kind of resigned your office and things like that based on the public's opinion and things like that. When you first came in office, I shook your hand. When you left, I shook your hand. Licensed professional people never say anything bad about people, man. You know, so like I wish you good luck in all your endeavors. Sutters, I'm calling for you to retire at the police commission office thing, man, as president. Mr. City Attorney, we still have some unfinished business that we never talked about with the city attorney. LAPD has a lot of work to do. It has a lot more work to accomplish. I'm calling for Andy Smith to come back to be chief of police because we couldn't get Bill Williams. That's the best that we can do right now. We don't have to have a search in anything else anymore. I've been down here for 20 years. I'm the oldest activist down here. I remember when we started over at the old building over there, and then you guys transferred over here. This property was developed on Hunt's Development. If you ever looked at the sign, it says Hunt's Development out there, you know. So I practically think that I'm the owner of this whole building and stuff like that, and I own pretty much all of downtown. But like I said, in this policing thing, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. I think you started out good, but I think you had a rocky finish. The people, the community is what counts. These people right here, you have to listen to them. You have to abide by what they say. We are the community. We're the people that's down here. I don't agree with the 45 minutes. We used to have meetings where everybody could speak. I don't agree with what Sutters did at the Watts meeting by condemning the people to 2 minutes. I don't agree with a lot of stuff. That violates the Brown Act. That violates the people's constitutional right. I just say that, you know, I hope Child listen to the people, and I hope you and wish you the best luck in all of your endeavors, because that's what good people do. Whatever you doing now is behind you. Whatever this police commission and whatever you're doing in your life is behind you. That's all I can say. Sutters, you need to call me at 424-249-0388. Let's talk about it.
Next, we have Philip Tabby.
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before the fall, Mike. You're so proud, you got rid of me for speaking truth to power. I've been around and volunteering at Foothill Station since I was a teenager. You moved to senior lead officer for doing the same thing, and I bet you were fully aware that Monica Rodriguez was under FBI investigation when you moved Caesar. You, Hamilton, and I had a sit down and decided to agree to disagree. I warned you then, man to mask, that if you did the same thing to Smith, we will know exactly why, and we, the community, would never give up. We are the children of this city. We were here before you decided to visit for a short time, and all you have done is left a mess that will take a long time to clean up. And we will be here long after you're gone. Today is our day to celebrate. You pushed the COVID agenda, and it's disgusting that there is still a COVID vaccine mandate under your watch. You removed the blue line flag from our station lobbies over a single phone call, yet you fly it at your house. You are a hypocrite. You got rid of pretext stops, making our communities less safe. You took a knee, and we will never forget. You protect those who are loyal to you and not loyal to the department, the officers, or the people. You promote people like Alan Hamilton, who lied to the community, and that clear evidence was recorded and online. You take Lozano out to pizza, the same guy you had remove me with no reason given. You investigate Mayor Bass, and we, the people, have no doubt you were shown the door. Show me who you are, show me who you walk with, and I will tell you who you are. On Thursday, Corrupt Soft on Crime, Monica Rodriguez, presented you with a certificate at your going away party. The same council person who led the Defund the LAPD movement. Good job, Mike. Good job. You have no ethics. You got a lot of money out of this city. Thank you for the pity party, Mike. The officers and the community are glad you're leaving. Now it's time for your skeletons to come out of the closet. God bless LAPD and God bless Los Angeles. I yield the rest of my time.
The next speaker, please, Jason Reedy.
Okay, so since you wanted to mention children today, at the Golden Dragon Parade a few weeks back, I ran into Errol Southers, who once again dodged questions about his involvement in the POW program he founded that led to the molestation of over 200 children. You had no other response than to say, "Give me a break," while cracking a half smile. Errol, do you find the sexual abuse of children funny? Is that funny to you? I also came across killer cop Frank Martinez and took on the responsibility of making sure he would not participate in that parade. And during that walk of shame back to his vehicle, 6 of your finest Central Division SLOs and their supervisor each took turns sending veiled threats to my family, including Senior Lead Officer Al Flores, who pushed me at one point and then asked me, "How's your son? How's he doing?" While fidgeting with something in his left pocket. You had Senior Lead Officer Edward Kellogg claim that I was the murderer, even though I was calling out a murderer of this department, called me Antifa and asked me how much I was getting paid to call out Frank Martinez. Later on, he said, "I can't wait to see your wife," and insinuated that I beat my partner and that's why I don't like police. The same Edward Kellogg, who has a history of violence towards women. In 2010, he broke a 53-year-old woman's arm during an arrest for possession and threw her against a fence. Kellogg and company delayed calling an ambulance for her for 30 minutes. And lastly, you had Senior Lead Officer Reina Quintanilla comment on the blue sweater my partner was wearing in an attempt to intimidate me. Mind you, my family was a block away when I approached these officers, when I approached killer cop Frank Martinez. So again, this isn't an aberration as you called, Rasha. It's standard practice. More, even you, when I was questioning you about Valentina Oriana Peralta years ago, you told me, "Make sure you take care of your son." What do you think that means when someone like him says, "Make sure you take care of your son"? I want to know, when you all interact with police, if they brought up your family, how would you take that? How would you take that? Now let's talk about the Inmate Wellness Fund in 3A. This Inmates Fund, you say, is a valuable service to arrestees, which is a blatant lie. At the June 5th, 2018 Police Commission meeting, the LAPD admitted that this fund was actually used for infrastructure because that money allegedly was not allocated in the city budget. And now a member of the public decided it was worth their time to audit the fund as opposed to the civilians sitting on this fucking board. Some of their findings included the misappropriation of those funds that were supposed to be primarily for the welfare of inmates that were instead paying for jail infrastructure, including... You have Sergeant Bruce Cross, who expensed boxing helmets and training gloves to be used in violent cell extractions as part of this fund, and 99.34% of this fund from 2021 to 2020.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the next speaker.
Next, we have Steve Rogers.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First, I'd like to say prayers for police officer Alejandro Fernandez, serial number 37174, who tragically committed suicide. Prayers for his family, his coworkers, and all affected. And that was not the last suicide. There will be, unfortunately, more suicides. What can we do about that? I know the police commission is interested in the mental health and well-being of the officers. They've expressed that in the past. Perhaps there could be an officer wellness check-in program where every 3 years or so, officers have to check in with behavioral sciences. So they could go sooner or later, but there will be no stigma about going to behavioral sciences to get have a check-in, get some counseling, see how they're doing, and it could be 15 minutes, it could be a half hour, 45 minutes, or whatever is necessary. But something has to be done. There are personal pressures, there are professional pressures in policing, and this could be the legacy of this commission, is to have some kind of a program where it's mandatory for the officers to check in, let's say every 3 years. There's much trauma on the job. The incident that was mentioned, the OIS, that's traumatic. Now, segueing to other types of trauma, morale is down in the LAPD. Okay, talk to the officers. All you have to do is talk to them. Go to the roll calls, close the door, talk to the protective league, the police union. But the trauma that Officer Chief Bended Knee visited upon the department was the bending of the knee in front of BLM. A police chief should never bend a knee. Police officers should never be bending a knee. They should be impartial. And the taking out of the thin blue line flag of the station lobby. Those two things should be rectified. There should have been an apology. That was a mistake. The chief has acknowledged mistakes, but wasn't specific. Let me say this, impartiality. Justice is unbiased and should not be based on a person's appearance or other outside influences. Lady Justice holds scales to represent the impartiality of decisions, and a sword is a symbol of the power of justice. That is usually in a courtroom, but it applies here. I do wish the chief the best in his retirement. Our disagreements have not been personal, but as you know, I have a strong passion for police officers. I am a resident of Los Angeles, and it pains me to see what's happened to the LAPD. They don't seem to be empowered. We need a course correction. Morale has to go up, and they have to start doing their job and be empowered. God bless the LAPD. Stay safe.
The next speaker, Matios Kudain.
Good morning. My name is Matias with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. First couple items I want to speak on. There's an auditor report on confidential informants for the department. Just want to uplift the history of confidential informants, one being primarily utilized to disrupt political activism. And I'm not talking about in the era of COINTELPRO. This happened as recently as 2017 when CIs were used to disrupt anti-Trump protesters, infiltrate anti-Trump protesters. So this is really just another weapon in LAPD's arsenal to monitor dissent or really any type of resistance against policing. I also want to uplift something that wasn't present in that report, which is just another example of the violence kind of levied out by LAPD. I'm specifically thinking about instances with officers Luis Valenzuela and James C. Nichols, who were two LAPD officers who were convicted with raping their confidential informants. And so there is a culture of sexual violence, of infiltration, of surveillance that's largely leveraged against Black community members or community members on the whole through the usage of confidential informants. Of course, we're not going to see that in this report because, as with any audit coming from the department, it's just going to be used to sanitize this violence, right, to legitimize it. That's also true of the helicopter report we have on here. There's nothing to justify a department that has the largest aerial fleet in the country, an aerial fleet that data shows disproportionately monitors Black communities, flies lowest in Black communities, disrupts, surveils, monitors Black communities. And so just want to quickly draw or shed some light on the illegitimacy of those two reports. Secondly, this RMS promo material, you got to ask yourself why. Why do we need to promote RMS? And I think that's because a records management system, on its face seems pretty mundane, especially when it's built out by the department. But on a national level, this type of data aggregation, data organizing system has been banned in a lot of cities, especially when it's been, popularized under Palantir, which is a CIA-backed company, right? And so, a lot of folks might think, what's the immediate harm in being able to aggregate or gather this much information or data? The truth is, with that amount of data organized in that way, the LAPD can tell any type of story, meaning they can easily criminalize whomever they want. And that's actually on the promotional material for the software used to build out this RMS, right? If we look at Motorola's promotional material for this, they talk about how you can use this to build a stronger case. It says, quote, simplifies information collection and documentation by capturing data across multiple systems to build a more complete case. That means bringing around points of data that aren't necessarily related in order to more easily criminalize somebody. And so we know that that's what this department is for. Chief Moore, you made it really easy to delegitimize and shit on this department. You'll be missed for that.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dora Delight. Dora Delight, you're on. Okay, we'll move to the next speaker, Mr. C.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay. I'd like to first, human to human, like to say, congratulations on your retirement, Chief Moore. Nothing I've said about you is personal. It has to do with the critique of your position. That being said, the January 20th of 2020, a statue was torn down in Los Angeles, Junipero Serra statue. That's not been solved. That appears to be as mysterious as the Black Dahlia crime. Anyway, to move on to the next one, on January 20th of 2024, another incident occurred on Hollywood and Highland. A man named Aaron Levin, who is a former Scientologist, was protesting against Scientology with his YouTube channel, live on a live feed. And on the live feed, he was assaulted by a black male suspect. And hours later, or a while later, he was arrested along with the suspect. And he committed no crime. The video clearly shows he was the victim of an assault and battery. In the end, Aaron was handcuffed, brought into the station, arrested as a victim of a crime. For 4 hours, he spent in the Hollywood station, I believe. And the person that committed the crime was basically, in the end, he wound up getting a misdemeanor for what he did, which was clearly a felony. I mean, I'm not a police officer, but when you smack somebody in the head and threaten to kill them, that seems like a felony to me. And then on top of that, 4 hours holding him in handcuffs at the station, he's the victim of a crime. So when you get raped, I guess, you get arrested as well, along with the rapist. Is that how that's going to work with the new LAPD? I guess that's how it works now, huh? So also there's a Tim Tallman, was officer that was there, and he seemed to be a problem. He was the instigator of the whole problem there. You guys really need to get him under wraps. I looked it up, and he's under West Valley Division, if that's correct. I don't know if it's correct or not, but West Valley Division, that's where he's from. So so you might want to look into that, because I'm sure Aaron will be suing you guys, and I hope he wins. On top of that, I don't think we should be bending our knees to anybody, genuflecting to any radical groups. That's not applying the law equally. That should never happen, especially from your position, Chief Moore. That should never have happened. Your position has to have some level of respect and authority, and that diminishes all of it. That being said, may God bless the LAPD, the good officers, and I yield my time.
Okay, next we have caller ending 6025. Caller 6025, you're on. Okay, we'll move on. Mr. President, that was our final speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We'll now move on to agenda item number 3, the consent agenda items. I'll ask the commission if we have any items from A to G that they would like to pull. Commissioner Kalanche? None? Commissioner Briggs? With that, I would move that we adopt the recommendation for board action for items 3A through G. Is there a second?
Second.
Then moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We now move on to agenda item number 4. Regular agenda items. We have a department's verbal presentation and discussion on Communications Division to triage calls for service. Commander Embrick, Captain Valois, did I say that right?
Yes, you did, sir.
All right. And if you would, just introduce everyone who's at the table.
Yes, I will, sir. So first I wanted to... Okay. Okay, good morning to the President and Vice President of the Board and the other honorable members of the Board of Police Commissioners. And of course, Chief Moore, congratulations on your last Police Commissioner hearing. And I want to start off by introducing my colleagues who are joining me today. So on my left is Captain Ray Valois, Commanding Officer, Communication Division. Captain Valois is very knowledgeable in our dispatch procedures. Prior to returning to Communications Division as our Commanding Officer, he served as a lieutenant there, so he not only knows the procedures inside and out, but he helped craft some of these. Prior to his assignment, where he's the Commanding Officer, Hollywood area, I was also the Commanding Officer, Pacific area, where we were both involved very early on at the launch of the Mayor's Circle Program Initiative and the expansion of the D.D. Hirsch program. Sitting to my right is Senior Police Representative Cheng Feng, better known as CT, throughout the department. I wanted to recognize CT not only for his work on the unarmed response programs, but also mention in November 2023, CT represented the department and the city of Los Angeles as a communications subject matter expert at Harvard Kennedy School of Executive Education in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Additionally, I also want to take a moment to recognize all of the dedicated City of Los Angeles, LAPD, police service representatives, 911 dispatchers, who we see as our law enforcement partners and the community's first point of contact when anyone in Los Angeles needs help. Okay, so slide. So again, Chief Moore led the most murderous police department in the
Sir, I'm going to ask you to stop disrupting the meeting. Sir, you're disrupting the meeting. This is your first and last warning for disrupting the meeting. After this, I will ask you to leave. Sir, leave the room. You're being ordered from the room. You're being ordered from the room. Apologies, Commander. Please proceed.
All right, thank you, sir. So on the screen, we're going to depict the 3 active alternative programs of police dispatch, and we also have one that's under development. First, we have the CREST program, or Call Direction to Ensure Suicide Safety, better known throughout the department and the community as the D.D. Hirsch program. Secondly, we have the Mayor's Office Circle program, or Crisis and Incident Response through community-led engagement. Third, we have the community online reporting system. And finally, the department is working with not only the mayor's office, but also the chief administrator's office in developing and implementing another unarmed model of crisis response. In addition to the alternative response programs, the department also deploys the nationally recognized LAPD SMART, or System-Wide Mental Assessment Response Team, or SMART team under the department's mental evaluation, housed in Detective Support Advice Division. We want to take a moment to familiarize you and the public with each of these programs. So starting with D.D. Hirsch is the regional answering point for the 988 National Suicide and Crisis Hotline, focusing on suicide prevention and mental health crises. Prior to July 2022, most people experiencing mental health emergencies were dialing 911. You're about to listen to Real Call involving a distraught individual with thoughts of suicide, and how our police service representative Valera handled the call.
911 operator 299. Hi, sir. My name's Cameron. I don't feel like it. I feel like I feel suicidal.
Have you hurt yourself today, Cameron?
What was that?
Have you hurt yourself today?
No, I just don't feel good, and I don't know. I just don't want to like.
Do you have any weapons on you?
No.
And how were you thinking of hurting yourself?
Well, like I prepped my death when I was younger, and I just don't want to. I have like a lot to want to talk about, and I don't know. I feel like I need someone to talk to, but I don't know. I just don't feel good right now. Like I have a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress.
Okay, so you just wanted to talk to somebody, right? You don't have any weapons or anything on you. You're not about to hurt yourself right now as we're speaking.
No.
Okay. What's your phone number, Cameron?
I don't have. I'm using someone else's phone.
Okay. Give me a sec. You want to talk to a counselor?
Sure.
Okay. Let me get somebody on the line with us. Okay. Let me just introduce them to you, and then I'll let them talk to you. All right?
Okay.
Diversion. This is Barbara.
Hi, Barbara. This is Operator 299 LAPD. I have Cameron on the line with us.
Hello.
He wants to talk to somebody.
Cameron, you say?
Cameron, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an incident number?
Incident 650.
Okay. And Cameron just needs to talk. You're not dispatching anyone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, Cameron.
Hi.
So prior to the D.D. Hirsch program, a call such as the one you just heard would result in officers being dispatched to the individual and the 911 operator having to de-escalate the situation and staying online with the caller, waiting for officers to arrive. We recognize that dispatching police officers may not always be the best response to address mental health crises. For too long, police officers were the only available response. When a call like this comes into 911, dispatchers have to make the call to dispatch police officers or divert the call to D.D. Hirsch program based on the following criteria, which you see on your screen right now. Okay, in all other non-dispatchable instances where the individual is isolated, suffering through a mental health crisis, a 911 dispatcher can connect the caller to D.D. Hirsch. The counselors are specialized, well-equipped to de-escalate and offer specialized resources to the individuals in need. Not only do callers receive the time and attention to focus on their crisis, but also frees up 911 dispatchers to answer other emergency calls for service. In 2023, Communications Division diverted approximately 1,400 calls to the D.D. Hirsch program. As you can see, comparing the trend in 2022, Communications Division has increasingly improved categorization of these calls. One of the indicators that we pay attention to is that only 3% of these calls that were diverted to the D.D. Hirsch program were diverted back or redirected back for police dispatch. So I think that's a very successful metric for our police service representatives. Next, we're going to discuss the Mayor's Circle program that focuses primarily on persons experiencing homelessness and quality of life issues that it poses to the larger community, business, and local residences. The city's contract provider for the Circle program is a nonprofit organization, Urban Alchemy. We partnered with Urban Alchemy since the start of the program in 2021, when, as I mentioned, Captain Valois was a commanding officer of Hollywood Division, and I was the commanding officer of Pacific Division, so we are very well-versed and been there since the program started. And CT was actually the gentleman who provided the briefs for us on a weekly basis. The Circle program responds to calls for service that involve persons experiencing homelessness that do not involve a criminal investigation and do not involve emergency situations. Instances available for diversion are determined based on specific types of scenarios involving persons experiencing homelessness and the activities associated with being homeless. If a call for service comes into 911 and the dispatcher determines that the subject of the call is using narcotics, engaged in lewd conduct, has a trespass order on file, needs medical attention, or the call involves a minor, is in immediate danger, or has made threats of potential for violence, police officers would be dispatched. If the call qualifies for Circle, the dispatcher will interview the caller, gather all the information, call Circle's dispatch operator, and provide them with the information. They will stay on the line with them. The following recording is an example of a citizen reporting a person experiencing homelessness in Venice and how Police Service Representative Ariano handled the report.
Los Angeles Police Department Operator 223.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, sorry, I had you on speaker there. So I'm in Venice, and for the past couple of hours, there's been some unfortunate unhoused man. He's been screaming and yelling, and then crying, and then kind of screaming gibberish. And I don't know if he's been puking or peeing in the planter across the street, but he seems like he needs a lot of help, and I really don't want to, get myself involved because it could be a dangerous situation. But I've noticed him around for a couple. Oh, sure. Venice, California.
Is he directly in front of that address?
He's right across the street. So there's like this white fence, and like there's some planters, and he's been kind of hanging out over there.
White fence and planters. Is he white, black, Hispanic, or Asian?
I think he's a white man. He's got like brown hair, a beard. He's wearing like maybe a blue flannel type shirt.
Blue flannel shirt. Okay. Was he waving around any weapons, anything like that?
I couldn't see any weapons, but I mean, he was screaming, and yeah, he seemed like he was in pain. I didn't see him hurt anyone.
Okay. He looks like he might be in some pain, or he looks like he might just need some relocation services, something like that.
Yes. I mean, I feel bad for him. It looks like he could use some help. I don't know, what type of services or if any he'd be willing to accept. But
Okay.
I mean,
well, the city of LA
just seems in bad shape.
The city of LA contracts with Urban Alchemy. They're a homeless outreach provider. So what we'll do is create a call for service for them to come out and offer him services to relocate him, find out if he needs medical attention or anything like that. If for some reason he turns out to be violent or anything like that, that's when they'll get the police involved. But first that's the first line of interaction with him. So we'll go ahead and do that. Would you like to leave your name or phone number?
Sure. Also, I think he might. I don't know if he was like high or something. It looked like he might have been like tripping or or something like that. So, okay. Yeah, Sham 0409.
All right, sir. We'll get somebody out there. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Of course, sir. Bye.
All right. Bye.
All right. So displayed on. Just a second.
Hello, LAPD. Thank you for contacting the Circle Project operated by Urban Alchemy. All calls are recorded for quality assurance. Please hold, and the next available operator will be with you in the order we received your call. If you do not wish to hold, you can press 1 at any time to leave a message.
Urban Alchemy, Operator 125.
Hi, Operator 125. This is Operator 223 with LAPD.
Hey, 223, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you, sir?
Doing good. What's the RD that we're working with today?
1444.
Okay. In the Pacific area?
Correct.
All right. Do you have an incident number?
Yes. 3103.
Okay. And the location? Is it residential or commercial?
Residential, and the PR said that it was directly across the street next to a white fence and planter.
Okay. And what's do you have a PR name and number?
Yes. His first name.
All right. And what's going on with this location?
He was reporting a subject, a male white with brown hair and beard, blue flannel shirt, who has been at that location for several hours. He's yelling, crying, talking to himself, appears possibly to be under the influence or impaired. He did not witness anything that appeared violent, and he did not observe any weapons.
Okay. All right. We're going to try to have a team out there as soon as possible. I have ticket number 118529. Once again, I'm operator 125, and hopefully we can resolve this issue.
Thank you so much, sir, and have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
All right, so the types of calls that would be diverted by our police service representatives to Urban Alchemy or the Circle program are displayed on your monitor. As you heard, our PSRs must also educate the community about the program and explain why officers are not responding to these calls. Calls of this nature are now 2 to 3 times longer than before, impacting services to the community as 911 operators are tied up, causing some delays in answering emergency calls for service. However, the balance we hope to strike is that in participating in the program, we also free up our police officers' time so that they can be available to respond to emergency calls for service. Circle is currently in 13 geographic LAPD areas. Harbor Division is the only division that Circle services in its entirety. Dispatchers have various resources to assist in determining if a call falls within Circle's purview and their service area. At some point in the future, as these programs expand, we could simplify dispatch by assigning alternative response programs to cover an entire area, the entire city, to streamline the 911 operator's interview process. In 2023, Communications Division diverted approximately 13,000 calls to the Circle program. Next slide. Next, we'll briefly discuss the CORS, or Community Online Reporting System. In 2016, Department launched the CORS, or Community Online Reporting System, which allowed community members to file traffic collisions and a limited category of crime reports online. Building on the success of the CORS program, the department expanded, and there are currently 22 types of community reports that community members can file online. On January 1st, 2024, the CORS system added hate incident reports online. Once a report is submitted to the CORS system, an automated reply email is sent to the reporting party advising them of their submission. The email will include a CORS report, tracking incident number, and a hate crime resource pamphlet link. If the caller dials 911 and reports one of these types of crimes, the police service representative would educate the member of the public, and advise them to that they may visit the online site to file the report. Once again, it is incumbent upon our police service representatives to have the background knowledge to determine if the crime is being reported should be dispatched or given to the various alternative resource programs for referrals. The Department Operations Center compiles the number of various reports made online weekly and then distributes that report to various entities within the department. 2023, the community members submitted over 131,000 reports to the CORS system. Okay, finally, we're getting to our SMART teams, our system-wide mental assessment response teams, and I know the Board of Commissioners is very familiar with this program, which the department currently operates. It's the department's only co-response program. It involves dispatching calls involving for persons experiencing mental illness. A SMART team is comprised of a sworn officer who is partnered with the LA County Department of Mental Health clinician. That SMART team is dispatched alongside patrol unit on calls involving mental illness and persons in high-risk situations. What is considered a high-risk or violent situation is subjective to the information the caller provides to the 911 dispatcher. When a 911 call involves a person experiencing mental illness, based on information received from the caller or the person reporting, the PSR determines whether co-response is required for acts of violence, presence of weapons, potential danger to the public, and finally the subject's state of mind, which is a sum of the total assessment that the PSR must make quickly during that brief interview over the phone. Let's listen to how Police Service Representative Martinez handled a caller calling in about their own spouse who was armed with a knife and was experiencing a mental health crisis.
911 operator 309.
Hi, I'm at Preston, and my wife is having a mental crisis. She has a knife in her hand, and she locked herself in the bathroom.
And is this an apartment or a house?
It's an apartment complex.
What apartment number? Do the officers need an entry code to get into the building?
No, but she's leaving the building right now.
Does she still have the knife?
I don't know.
What's your wife's name?
Her name's
she black, white, Hispanic, or Asian?
She's Asian.
How old is she?
She's 30.
How tall is she?
She's 5'1".
Medium build, thin build, heavy build?
Then she's currently exiting the building and
What color shirt and pants does she have
walking
on?
out. She has a red, white, and blue jacket.
And she's on foot?
Yeah.
What
She's sitting out
direction
of she's sitting out front of the apartment building right now.
Did you see the knife?
Yeah, I did.
So she still has it?
She went into our kitchen and grabbed it. I told her I was going to call 911, so she stepped out and now she's smoking a cigarette on the
Is
corner.
she suicidal?
I'm a little bit worried about it, yeah.
What kind of mental illness does she suffer from?
Anxiety and depression.
She compliant with her medication?
I don't know if she's been taking it recently.
Did she harm you or threaten to harm you?
I was pretty concerned, yeah. She had the knife in her hand and she told me to get this out.
What is your name, sir?
So my name is,
Your telephone number?
it's 714.
Okay. And has she acted this way before?
A little bit, but she stopped attending therapy about 2 months ago. She just told me.
Okay. Has she attempted suicide in the past?
She's injured herself in the past, yeah.
And how did she do that?
With a knife, the same way.
With a knife? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll send the police out there.
Thank you very much.
All
Is there like a ETA?
No, we don't give ETAs.
Makes sense.
Northeast units with smart, violent female with mental illness, and you're sitting in front of the building. Subject is a female Asian, 30 years, 5'1", thin build, red, white, and blue jacket, armed with a knife. Code 3, incident 531, RD 1173.
So as you heard, if the 911 operator makes a determination that the call for service warrants a SMART team co-response, and dispatcher will broadcast the incident information not only on the geographic area's base frequency, but they also broadcast it on the mental evaluation units radio frequency, so that both entities have situational awareness. As you're aware, we're going into our final topic now. The CAO is implementing a model of unarmed response which we hope to be effective the first quarter of 2024, which was inspired by Eugene, Oregon's Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, or better known as the CAHOOTS program. The City of Los Angeles' motto is known as the Unarmed Model of Crisis Response, or UMCR, which focuses primarily on individuals experiencing a nonviolent crisis and or social service components for the general population. The CAO has contracted 3 providers, with Exodus Recovery acting as the primary contractor to receive calls from Communication Division. The pilot program for the UMCR will cover 3 geographic areas at the start of the 1-year pilot program. Much like Circle, the PSRs will determine if an incident falls under the criteria for diversion under UMCR. One change that we implemented is once the program goes active is instead of having a 911 dispatcher spend the time calling a service provider, relay the information verbally, the information is going to be digitally sent through our computer-aided dispatch system, or CAD system. This information would be accessible to the alternative service response providers. This would apply to both the UMCR as well as our existing Circle program. The goal is to streamline call creation and transfers of call for service to providers, additionally avoiding phone calls that would delay 911 operators from answering other calls for service. So finally, I'd like to thank the Board of Police Commissioners and Chief Moore for giving us this time to share our current and upcoming alternatives to police service responses with the publicly, and specifically how we can serve members of the community who are experiencing mental health issues or unhoused individuals better. Ideally, we envision a future that would allow the public the choice to call the number or to call a number other than 911, a call center that is 24/7, that the public can reach, and the preference is to have professional behavior clinicians, crisis practitioners, mental health professionals, or homeless outreach specialists respond instead of a uniformed officer in most cases. This will leave 911 operators more time to answer calls that focus on sending fire, paramedic, or police officers to save lives and protect the public. Thank you, Chief Moore, and the honorable members of the Board of Police Commissioners for allowing this opportunity to share this important work that our unsung heroes, the 911 dispatchers, police service representatives do every day. And we are prepared if you have any questions.
Commander, thank you very much for your presentation. You've made tremendous strides, obviously, in trying to address the concerns that we have as it relates to public safety, as it combined with public health, and offering an alternative to a police response and some officer hours saved. So I'll reserve my questions For last, I'll go to Commissioner Garcia to ask if he has any questions.
I know one of the callers asked what the response time, and the response was there is no response time. But do we have data on what it is for each of the alternative responses?
As far as their response time, I don't have that information. I'd have to get back to you on that unless.
As far as code 3 calls, our response time usually within less than 8-10 minutes as far as officer getting there on scene.
Yeah, it really depends on what the specific call is. Our goal is 7 minutes response time for our 911 call.
And Commissioner, the individual service providers, whether it be Circle or these other providers, they do track that information, and periodically we'll be able to harvest that and report to the city, particularly to City Council and the Mayor's office. So it's something we can follow back up with you. It is not, in instances, they're readily available. Other times it may take 20, 30, 40 minutes or longer for those resources to get there. Again, it's dependent on those agencies and what other calls they're handling. And then you can see here the scale of those services do not cover the entire area because of just, in candor, the workload and the number of resources they have available. So there is a balancing effort of trying to get a crisis response there timely, but at the same time having enough resources to cover all the demands. But we can follow up with you. But I saw this report last year, and it was there were hours and times in which it would take for them to get there. This was particularly in the Hollywood area with the Circle program, where we walked that program a year or two ago.
Thank you. Do we have can you all share whether there's communication sooner than there's response, like physical response? In other words, like when the call is transferred over and someone else is then going to take it over, do they communicate with the caller to get updates if it takes them 30 minutes or if it takes them an hour to actually arrive, to ensure that they're being updated on that incident?
Excuse me, can you identify yourself for the record, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Senior PSR1, Ching Feng. So currently with the current programs, the service providers do not contact the person that reported the call. Since all calls are going to come into the 911 center first and then transfer to those service providers. With the new program, with the unarmed model crisis response, one of the things that they will do is once we electronically send a call over to them, that service provider will attempt to contact the person reporting to get any additional information, to see if there's any more information that they would like, and then they can provide any kind of information for them at that point.
The exception to that is D.D. Hirsch. You want to talk about that and the handoff that goes back and forth?
Yeah, as far as D.D. Hirsch goes, that's directly dealing with the operators transferring that callers to that basically 988, the National Crisis Hotline. So they're going to answer that directly. We don't dispatch. The only time we're transferring those calls is strictly that caller is feeling under crisis, and they might be suicidal, but they are by themselves. They're not in danger in any public or anyone within their residence. And therefore, it's much safer for us to transfer them to a more professional help.
And we do track the referral back. There's instances in which D.D. Hirsch will not. They begin to have a dialogue, they discuss as their assessment goes, they realize that it doesn't fit within their protocol or the timeliness of their protocol, and they'll refer those back to the department, and we'll have to, and then we will dispatch. But that's another mechanism that we follow. And as I recall, I think for every 5 that you send there, you may get as many as 1 back.
It's about 3%.
3%.
I'm sorry, only 3%.
3%.
Okay, so it's even better than I thought. Okay.
Yeah, so like CT was talking about, so if we talk about like the Circle program, we conduct what we call like a warm handoff. So the caller calls in, our PSR gathers as much information as they need to determine that they're going to transfer the call to Urban Alchemy. And they stay on the line with not only the caller, but also do a verbal handoff or the warm handoff that we're talking about. So hopefully, like we mentioned, we hope to streamline that with our computer-aided dispatch, and we just send all the information over with the incident number.
Thank you. Then you mentioned that you foresee, or the goal is to establish alternative numbers so people can call directly. What is the timeline of something like that?
Well, honestly, that right now is up to the service providers, because that is one of the features that we did discuss very early on in implementation of the Circle program, in which there was going to be a direct line that the public could contact the Circle program or Urban Alchemy. Not quite ready for that evolution yet, but at some point, that's the goal of of all of the programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Vice President Shields.
Thank you. That was going to be one of my first questions of, is there an alternative number? Because that would definitely free up a lot of time, particularly for Circle. And you mentioned that the Circle program is in 13 geographic areas. Is there a timeline or plan on expanding that program throughout all of the regions?
I'm sorry, ma'am. That is through the mayor's office. So it's their program and their decision how much they're going to expand, when they're going to either incorporate an entire area or add additional areas. So again, that's kind of with the unarmed model response. It's city councils, the mayor's program. They make those decisions.
Thank you. And it's great to see that, was it 13,000 calls were diverted to the Circle program?
For last year.
That's amazing. I've spoken with, officers, and one of the things that I think that they find very kind of demoralizing or disheartening is that their lack of ability to really do much, especially, homeowners or others complaining that someone is unhoused outside of their building, defecating, and there's not a lot of action that is actually taken. I imagine in those situations, if the Circle program is there, that's something that Circle can respond to in lieu of the officers. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. They do, and unfortunately, as well, it does take a while for those service providers to, build a rapport with that unhoused individual. So it doesn't always necessarily show a immediate response of that unhoused individual to leave or to do anything, but they will go back. So they may respond the first time, go talk to them, introduce themselves, and then come back the following day or within the next couple of days again to interact with that unhoused individual. So they're building that rapport so that eventually they can find resources for them and that they're willing to go and get that help.
And if I can interject, the benefit of the Circle program, the strength of it beyond any social program in LA County before this is it's 24/7. And so what he's indicating is that it may take 5, 10, 15, 20 encounters for that person to build any sense of trust or confidence where they'll actually begin a more productive conversation and be able to mediate this. But even when they're not handling calls, there's times in which there's no calls in the queue, they have the ambassadors or outreach workers that are working in those neighborhoods that are doing outreach engagement just as police officers do with community. So it's time-based, where over time they know where the problematic sites are, they track the hotspots, so to speak, the most problematic individuals, and they do build relationships. And that's why in each of these instances we've seen a reduction in call load, we've seen a reduction in crime over time with those relationships that are built.
That's great to hear, and I think we would all welcome, more of those services throughout the city, and a really phenomenal job in terms of the D.D. Hirsch program and the online reporting and all of these things. And with regards to the SMART co-response model, can you talk a little bit about how the 911 operators are trained to ensure that they understand when it is appropriate to have a co-response model dispatched, because that is something that obviously it can be really the difference between life and death, and that's something that's very critical. And how do you also balance in terms of training of like getting as much information from the call while also dispatching as immediately as possible? That's always, it seems like a tension. I'm like, just tell the, if someone's walking out with a knife or a gun or something, how do you balance that?
Well, obviously, PSRs have a lot of, we have a great training program. They have a lot of experience. As far as questioning and interview, they have skills beyond most people's ability to do that. One of the biggest things as far as making sure that a SMART team response is obviously getting the caller to be able to tell us whether or not this person is suffering from some kind of mental illness. Now, not every caller can say that, but if the person is under stress, any kind of questions that the operator is going to be able to gather from the caller, if they feel like this would be a call that would be beneficial to have a SMART team to co-respond with our patrol unit, then they're going to make that decision. So it's really up to the PSRs to, based on that interview and what the person calling is reporting, for them to make that decision.
If I might add a little bit to that, the PSRs have taken thousands of calls, and over this period of time have built up this knowledge base, this intuition, if you will, that the subject of the radio call may be suffering from mental illness. They will err in the side of sending a SMART team versus not.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just to follow up on that last question, what happens when there isn't a SMART team available? Because we know that we're short, right, of SMART units or SMART teams. So if they find that there is a need for a SMART team and we don't have one available, then what happens?
Well, we still dispatch police officers because it still would meet the criteria of emergency call for service. And hopefully, we've been encouraging more and more officers to participate in their MHET training or mental health intervention training. So officers are not without training. We're just not as well equipped as a mental health practitioner with years of experience.
And the protocols have expanded in the last 7 years as well. For instance, the edge weapon protocol. So it may often have a person who's experiencing a mental health crisis that's armed with some type of a weapon, and that requires a supervisor to be dispatched, as well as the equipment of the officers having less lethal, such as a 40 millimeter. And it's meant to also stage the officer, pre-stage the officer's mindset as they're coming into a situation that they may be dealing with a person experiencing mental illness. They also will put that communication over the comments of the call and broadcast that the person's having a mental health crisis. Again, these are efforts as the officers are then en route to begin preparation about de-escalation, efforts to slow things down, cover, getting added resources there, efforts to again, work through what will be undoubtedly a crisis situation. And with the absence of SMART resources, we are a co-responder model today. 2 years ago, we implemented that where SMART used to go after there was a code, quote unquote, code 4. Today, they're dispatched simultaneously, but they are only handling about a third or less than a third of mental health related calls because of a shortage of personnel. That shortage continues to be the lack of clinicians.
Right.
We could use another 15 to 30 clinicians. DMH is working. They've effectively this last year expanded the compensation, the working conditions, and attempts to improve. And then most recently, DSVD may be better to address this, but communications may also, is that we're trying to go with the telehealth model so that when there's an absence of a clinician in the field, that they could provide support via a face, Zoom type or Teams type call remotely over an iPad. That is still in the final throes of working with DMH for those protocols as an effort to expand availability of mental health clinicians.
Interesting. Okay, so what happens if somebody walks into a police station that's showing distress or mental health or any of these issues that that PSRs are diverting? What happens when someone walks into a police station?
Well, obviously, they would contact whoever the officer is at the front desk, and immediately once that officer recognizes that it would be a mental health or mental illness issue, they can get on their radio and request a SMART team as well. And then the PSR monitoring that frequency.
So PSR will still be involved?
Will repeat that request on the appropriate frequency to get the SMART team there.
Okay, just concerned about, the officers working the front desk, being able to identify, the need, for these types of programs, right? And then lastly, you put some data up, some data tables that were hard to see. Can we get those sent to us?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it. That is it, thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, gentlemen, just a couple of questions, some metrics. What's our total annual number of calls for service?
In 2023, Communications Division received just under 3 million 911 calls.
Okay.
In addition to that, a little over 500,000 non-emergency calls to 1-800-ASK or 1-887-ASK-LAPD.
Great. And with that, what's your approximate percentage of diverted calls, if you know?
Well, sir, we
For
can
all,
do,
and I'm asking, if you can, for these programs you presented today in totality, what percentage of the 3 million?
it's a very small percentage, but it's growing every year. So, for example, the total number of calls that were diverted in all of 2023 was 3,979. In 2024, we're only in February, and we're already at 4,582 calls. So you can see these programs are taking off.
But I need you to clarify also, because we also don't dispatch to every 911 call.
Right.
So the number of dispatch calls, I think it's better, the metrics is better to understand how many calls did we get dispatched out of those 3.4 million calls. I think we dispatched about 1 million calls.
I can answer that,
Okay,
Chief.
thank
We
you.
had roughly 763,000 incidents that were generated from those 911 calls. Out of those incidents, there was roughly 28 to 30,000 calls that were diverted, whether it be to D.D. Hirsch or to Circle or to the course program.
Excellent. And then with that, ultimately, what we would like to see is approximately the number of patrol officer hours saved, if we could get that. And then what we would hope to see over time, obviously, is that number would go up and the number of calls that they actually have to handle go down. So,
Yes, sir. We certainly, where there's 15% reduction of calls for service last year, we certainly believe that these programs are greatly contributing to that number.
excellent, excellent. And the last question I have is about, as the chief mentioned, we've got a clinician shortage, obviously, but I would imagine that we may have the same situation with dispatch. What's our dispatch personnel strength right now?
Currently, we're running at about 180 PSR vacancies. However, there is lately some light at the end of the tunnel. About a month ago, we started a new class of 24.
Okay.
We're hoping in March to have another class of between 15 and 20. The hiring is starting to heat up a little bit and warm up, so it does seem like it's going to be improving. But it does take almost a year for a PSR to be fully trained and fully capable and fully qualified.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, to your point, currently, Communications Division is on a mandated overtime schedule. There are one of two, or actually 3 organizational units within the department that, because the staffing shortage is so severe, that we actually are directing PSRs each day, a portion of them, to remain over. The mayor's office has provided for PSRs to be unfrozen, if you will. So that is an area that we are able to hire, continue to hire, as the city understands its fiscal crisis, and the continued support into 24, 25 is anticipated to rebuild this organizational unit. But we owe a debt of gratitude to this workforce. They're continually are innovative in their efforts to try to, and dedicated in their efforts to try to meet the needs of the public. What we would ask, though, is that you recognize the optics of nearly 3 million calls on 911. The vast majority of those calls are not emergency calls. The public remains far too dependent on the 911 system for matters that should have an alternative. To Commissioner Shields' point, 988 is an alternative. What are alternatives to circle programs and so forth? We need to continue to educate the public on those alternatives to save the precious seconds that officers and that PSRs are losing as they're holding on to calls or answering calls for non-emergency matters.
Thank you, Chief. And with that, as you mentioned, this is a community priority, it's a department priority. I just want to thank you for all the hard work you're doing. It seems that we're trending in the right directions. We appreciate your report.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to regular agenda item 4B, Department's report on the response to the City Controller's audit of Air Support Division. I believe I have Assistant Chief Chow, Chief Kowalski, Commander Paulson, and Lieutenant. Thank you. Chief, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, Commissioner President Suthers, Vice President Shields, Commissioner Calanche, Commissioner Garcia, Chief Moore, congratulations, and Inspector General Smith. As we're here to report to This will go over the department's response. But first, let me commend Commander Paulson for her work in preparing this very detailed response, working with our personnel at Air Support Division, as well as many other entities. I think you'll find that this is a very well thought out and written response to the controller's audit. I will present major findings and responses by the department at a high level, hitting on the major points. I'll hand it over to Deputy Chief Kowalski, Commander Paulson, and then Lieutenant Ismail to get some details and comments. But as you know, late last year, the Controller's Office conducted an audit of LAPD's Air Support Division. They focused on the cost and usage of our Air Support Division helicopters, looking at purpose and cost, and it encompassed fiscal year 2018 to 2022. Their intent, as outlined in the audit, was to evaluate the cost and performance of the department's helicopters and to explore whether the LAPD has justified the need for the program's size and scope. First, the Controller's audit hung its hat on several findings after an analysis of metrics and data obtained or assumed by the Controller's Office. And this presentation will focus on a few general topics with respect to the Controller's assertions and findings. In summary, there will be regarding crime statistics, the cost of operations, our Air Support Division's program, scope, and mission, the metrics that were used to measure Air Support Division performance, and general assumptions about the impact of health made by the auditors. All the assumptions and conclusions by the auditors will be discussed with the LAPD response. Now, it should be noted, in an attempt to match the data and validate some of the Controller's findings, requests were made to obtain and identify the raw data by the Controller's Office. Unfortunately, these sources of data are not provided to the department. First, I'll begin with the assumptions of the Air Support mission. The Controller concluded that the mission of Air Support was, quote, when on patrol, Air Support practices is to prioritize response to Part 1 crimes. It goes on to assume that Part 1 crimes are the most serious crimes based upon nature and frequency. However, in our opinion, this is not an accurate summary of the Air Support Division mission. To coordinate Air Support Division time response into the field, total Part 1 crimes paints a somewhat inaccurate picture of their mission. Part 1 crimes are defined by the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Standards. These include homicides, robberies, aggravated assaults, sex crimes, but also property crimes such as motor vehicle theft, burglaries, and theft such as shoplifts. The audit failed to take into account that Part 1 crimes are nonviolent crimes that can be reported late without generating a radio call or a nonviolent and would not necessarily result in the response of an air unit. A more accurate comparison would be to compare Air Support Division flight response to violent crimes or calls for service, not all Part 1 crimes, as the Controller's audit asserted. If we analyzed Air Support Division flight time versus violent crime from 2018 to 2022, we found that Air Support Division flight time is actually directly proportional to the violent crime rate in the different LAPD divisions. Exactly what we want. Evidence of this can be found on page 13 of the department response. If we look at Air Support Division flight time versus shots fired incidents, we also find that the airship spends time above those areas in which shots fired calls and crimes are occurring, and we have a positive correlation. We also find that if we compare Air Support Division airships being overhead during pursuits and whether or not a suspect is apprehended, suspects are apprehended at a much higher rate when the airship is overhead versus not. If we look at officer safety and community safety, if we look at air support being overhead during pursuits versus traffic collisions, we found when the airship tracking was initiated, which results in the units being able to get some distance from the suspect, the rate of traffic collisions during a pursuit decreased significantly. I'll switch to costs. The Controller's audit asserts that Air Support Division is too costly when comparing the operating budget of Air Support Division to other city departments, and it pointed out that the LAPD budget was about $1.3 billion, with Air Support being at $48 million. What we looked at during costs was several different things. I'll just hit a couple. One, we looked at the fuel costs. The audit approximated an hourly burn rate of fuel at 48 gallons per hour, which they extrapolated to an assumed 16,000 hours of flight time per year. However, based on actual costs for those 4 years, the audit overestimated fuel costs and flight time, which resulted in a significant overestimation of fuel costs over the 5-year period. Regarding ceremonial transportation and services, the audit was critical of Air Support Division engaged in flights not associated with Part 1 crime and being engaged in such things as ceremonial flights, which they quoted as funerals, promotions, graduations, and community events. The audit assumed the cost of these ceremonial flights was over $2 million. However, what the audit attempted to provide as a cost analysis attributed to the ceremonial flights was inaccurate. The vast majority of the ceremonial flights, the airship is a patrol airship when it's already in the air conducting normal patrol operations, and therefore no additional costs. In all cases, should the airship be needed for response to a higher priority incident, it would have been redirected. And I will now turn over the presentation to Deputy Chief Kowalski.
Good morning. As part of the department's response to the City Controller's LAPD helicopter audit, it's important to highlight how pivotal a role that air support plays in public safety here in Los Angeles. For the calendar year 2023, air support responded to 31,350 incidents and was first on scene in 6,369 calls citywide. They initiated the arrest of 1,159 persons for felony offenses and assisted in more than 7,682 other felony arrests. The air unit logged more than 2,085 extra patrol hours and provided direction, guidance, and aerial support in 395 vehicle pursuits citywide. The air unit assisted in the recovery of 584 handguns and identified 26 fires across the city. While this is only a snapshot of their overall value to our goal of reducing the fear and incidence of crime, it does demonstrate that the critical role that our aviation program continues to play in policing in one of the largest metropolitan cities in America. Commander Paulson will now further highlight specific findings in this report.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Tiefenk. The Department's response to the Controller's audit includes contributions from personnel within not just Air Support Division and Counterterrorism and Special Operations Bureau, but also the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy, Audit Division, and Fiscal Group. Multiple knowledgeable personnel and subject matter experts within these commands spent countless hours researching and validating the contents of the report, which you have before you. Our approach to the audit was to first review and appropriately respond to those areas where positive change could be enacted. To that end, Air Support Division embraced the constructive criticism regarding our need to improve our public outreach efforts and the capture of daily flight activities. We have been making progress in these areas and are prepared to discuss those achievements. In regards to the Controller's remaining criticisms and conclusions, the Department found much of the information inaccurate and that the Controller's audit drew an incomplete picture of the services provided by our Air Support Division. This included, as Assistant Chief Chow alluded to, the cost conclusions, which in many cases were based on approximations and estimations despite the availability of well-documented cost tracking and actual receipts. For instance, calculations based on the documented burn rate and fuel costs revealed the Controller's estimates were inflated 21% over actual verifiable expenditures. One of the most notable conclusions in the Controller's audit was the assertion that 61% of ASD flight time was spent on what they termed to be activities not associated with high-priority crime. Linked to this was the assertion by their analysis that Air Support Division response and coverage was disproportionately spread throughout the city in comparison to the crime occurring in the various neighborhoods and divisions. However, as mentioned again by Assistant Chief Chow, these conclusions were based on a highly inaccurate definition of high-priority crime, and specifically, the audit team's mistaken assertion that Air Support Division prioritizes response specifically to Part 1 crime. This fundamental lack of understanding of police response and police work in general appears to have led to many of the inaccuracies contained in the Controller's report. Part 1 crime is an FBI designation developed for purposes of national crime rate comparison. It is formally determined only after a full investigation of an occurrence is conducted. It is neither designated nor considered as a factor during the creation of a radio call, during prioritization by our dispatchers, or response by our ground units or air units. Our air support assets respond to those incidents where ground officers request or air crews determine in their professional law enforcement judgment that a police helicopter would prove most beneficial to public or officer safety, could interrupt criminal activity, or assist in the apprehension of offenders. This determination is predicated on the information that is available at the immediate point in time. This is most frequently based on the information provided by a 911 caller. As we highlight as an example in our response, should a resident return home at the end of a workday to find their house was broken into at some point over the last 8 or 10 hours, or come out to their car in the morning to find that their car was stolen at some point during the night, those are both Part 1 crimes by definition. However, they are unlikely to provoke a response from an airship due to the fact the crime is stale. It happened hours ago, and the suspect is most likely has departed several hours ago. However, if a caller dials 911 to report a street takeover activity by speeding and racing vehicles, engaging in highly dangerous driving activity, this is very likely to result in an airship response. Neither street racing nor street takeover activity are Part 1 crimes as identified by the FBI. Similarly, should a caller dial 911 and report shots fired, this will receive a priority response from ground units as well as an airship. The investigation could culminate in the incident being determined to be an assault with a deadly weapon, an attempted murder, or perhaps a tragic homicide, all of which would later be categorized as Part 1 crimes. However, the investigation may also ultimately determine the act to be a crime such as shooting into an inhabited dwelling, negligent discharge of a firearm, vandalism, or perhaps even simply fireworks, none of which, of course, are Part 1 crimes. Nonetheless, at the time the call was created, it would have been responded to with an appropriate priority due to the potential threat to public safety. This, of course, would involve the response of any available airship. We also believe it's important to point out the statistical evidence of incredible accomplishments and contributions of Air Support Division to overall public safety and the apprehension of offenders. The mitigation of risk and prevention of loss and damage which can be associated with these accomplishments must be factored into any valid assessment of cost or value of a program or resource. Deputy Chief Kowalski highlighted some of ASD's productivity documented throughout 2023. But in our response, we were able to provide not only anecdotal but also clear statistical evidence that the use and availability of police helicopters reduces public harm and mitigates risk in many situations. A perfect example of this is police pursuits, as was addressed by Assistant Chief Chow. I'd like to close by inviting Lieutenant Tarek Ismail of Air Support Division to share just a couple of our very recent activities which realistically articulate the day-to-day contributions of our Air Support Division.
Good morning, Honorable Commission. Good morning, Chief. Air Support is up for approximately 20 hours out of the day, and 4 hours they are on call to respond to anything that's needed or requested by any personnel on the ground. And the calls that they go to are, it's a facet of calls from anywhere from a lost hiker to a robbery or a burglary. I'll take you through a couple of those calls. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a woman that was lost at night in the Santa Monica Hills. She went hiking and did get lost. And so the airship responded, was able to locate her on the FLIR and used the night sun to guide her through the terrain. It was about a mile out to get her to safety. So that's a low priority call. However, if she would have been stuck there, obviously she's in grave danger. In turn, responding to a burglary in progress. So for example, a couple of weeks ago, we responded to a burglary in progress to where upon the arrival of the unit and the airship, they located one suspect and 4 suspects fled into the hills. After, again, using the FLIR, they located the other suspects that were hiding in the hills and were able to take them into custody. And yes, sir.
Just for the audience, just describe a forward-looking infrared device. FLIR, just describe that.
Oh, FLIR, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So FLIR is the forward-looking infrared. So basically, as you apply the FLIR to any specific location, if it recognizes a heat signature, you'll be able to see it on the screen in the aircraft. So that's what a FLIR is. My apologies. And those suspects that were in the hillside ended up being wanted by the department, and they were part of the Chilean burglary crew. So just to give you a couple of examples of what we do, from something minor to something major.
All right, thank you. So thank you, Commissioners. As we've summarized in this presentation, as well as the Department's written response, we do not agree with many of the conclusions reached by the Controller's audit. The data used to reach our conclusions either cannot be verified or is inaccurate. An Air Support Division, as you've heard, exists to support the public safety mission of the department, to keep officers safe and to keep our community members safe in many different scenarios. You know, the question is, how do you put a price on saving a life? So with that, we'd like to open it to questions.
Thank you, Chief. I'll go to Vice President Shields first for questions or comments.
Thank you, President Southers, and thank you for this presentation and the very thorough report. I really appreciate it. Just a couple of things, and I think the chief even mentioned that just as last week, one of the individuals that after wrestling with a canine unit was fled again and was captured by the airship. Just as, again, as recently as last week, we don't have to look very far for these experiences. And if I'm reading the report right, is it, and I think, Commander Paulson, you've touched on some of this, when the controller used Part 1 crimes to assess whether this was, a truly urgent need, was this something that he consulted with the department about, or understanding the differences between what is Part 1 crime versus what are other serious crimes, such as brandishing of firearms, kidnapping, street racing, all of these things that may not be Part 1? Did he consult with the department at all to understand this?
There was some discussion regarding prioritization and prioritization of radio calls. What I think unfortunately did not occur was a greater conversation as to that application in the field, as calls are actually generated based on information from 911 calls, and the police department's response in our day-to-day business to be equipped for the worst-case scenario, quite frankly, and to handle 911 calls based on the information received, again, addressing it as it could be a worst-case scenario based on that information. There was if there had been a greater observation of police work, perhaps some ride-alongs to see, that application in the field and that assistance that is rendered in real time, I think perhaps that would have assisted in a greater conversation and perhaps a better understanding.
Thank you. And it did seem like the concept that the airship is essentially an extension of patrol was kind of lost on at least the initial report. And so, and I think, Assistant Chief Chow, you mentioned, with regards to like ceremonial flyovers or something, is that essentially, would that be equivalent to a patrol car that is already on patrol being diverted to, say, pass by City Hall during a portion of their patrol, but that not costing the city more money? It's just a matter of those few minutes of flyover.
Yes, that's a great analogy. That's exactly what happens with our airships. As a matter of fact, before an airship does a flyover at a graduation or another event, there's a whole approval process that starts with the sergeant and goes up through the watch commander and the commanding officer to make sure that, that event is in line or can be done. Again, as I mentioned, just like with patrol, if a higher priority call comes out, that airship is diverted and will not be able to take part in the flyover, but they're up anyway.
Thank you. I don't have any additional questions. Thank you for the great report.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. Commissioner Garcia.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. We have a 42-page report here and super detailed, and we appreciate that. What is a way to package this to get it out to the general community or the residents of the city? Because I think the report that was inaccurate, like one, what is the total cost and accuracy? And then two, what is the harm in terms of the department legitimacy that report potentially has caused or is causing? And so what is our, not response to it, because we don't, but responsibility to the community, make sure that they're educated and they understand what really is happening in that space?
Well, I think once the police commission adopts a report, there's opportunities, and there has been interest over in city council about looking at our our response in different circles within the city. I think that, once it's adopted, I think there's opportunities from our end with our department as well as Air Support Division through our social media and a lot of educational programs that we have that do reach out to the public to make sure that, that narrative about what we found and what actually Air Support Division does is very important to the community. Obviously one of the things that happened when the report first came out, there was some media coverage about the report, and we actually hadn't had a chance to sit down and actually go through, or Shannon hadn't, to go through and look and kind of dissect it, but now that we're at that point, I think we have opportunities to go to talk to the public about what we found and what our Air Support Division actually, the value it provides to the community safety.
Thank you. And have we had conversations with the controller to compare outcomes? And really what I'm getting at is, how do we work with them to prevent something like this from happening in the future?
Well, that's the next step. Early on, when we were going through the audit process, we did receive a draft of their audit. It wasn't a final, but we were able to respond back to them with some observations that we had made. Then some of the responses are actually detailed in their audit. But now that ours is complete, we'll have the opportunity to maybe sit down with them and actually go over kind of what we found. Because as Commander Paulstetter mentioned, there are some things in there with flight data and improving the systems that we have about how we track what we're doing that does have measure. So that there are things in the audit that we agree with.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Clanche.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and the report. Couple of follow-ups. Do we have a protocol in place for deploying airships to scenes? Besides, there's something in progress and, yeah.
Good morning. Ma'am, essentially the airship is like a black and white in the sky.
Right.
So just to give you a quick example, first at scene. Once we deploy to the scene, we're able to gauge what's going on and tactically deploy the officers and tactically reduce the overall issues that may occur in the community. So for example, from 2020 to the end of 2023, we were at scene 40,529 times. That's first at scene. And you mitigate risk when you're first at scene. Potential risk for the community and potential risk for the officers.
Can you tell me again, what is the percentage of time that we're first at scene?
40,529 times.
Out of, so what?
This is from January 2020 till 23.
Okay, so, okay, I'll have to do the math then.
So last year, it was approximately around 31,000 times.
Okay. Okay, continue. I was just trying to get a percentage and, compared to what? Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So basically, when we respond, we have the ability to deploy personnel as they're coming to a specific call. And again, ensure that they are safe and safety for the community.
And from a staffing point of view, I mean, in our bureau, obviously, training of pilots and tactical flight officers is a long process and a very difficult process. Our goal is to try to have at least 2 helicopters available citywide because of the size of the city. I mean, it's hard to compare our city with others because of the square mileage, right? I mean, we can't compare Los Angeles to New York in that way because we utilize the helicopters in a different manner, and they're more vital, and frankly, they're part of the fabric of every police officer that's part of this department. There's a reliance on it, and it's part of our tactics, and it is difficult to measure that out when an officer's at scene, and having not just a police officer in the sky from the helicopter, but oftentimes, as the lieutenant seated here today, he's a pilot, and we have sergeants at scene, and oftentimes sergeants and lieutenants are overseeing these critical incidents, such as the vehicle pursuits, to provide oversight and give those ground commanders guidance and ideas and advice to handle those to minimize risk.
And Commissioner, to directly, any Code 3 call
Okay.
that is occurring, crime in progress, robbery in progress, It goes on, there's a channel, 26 channel, that's air support monitors that channel. What these men and women are able to do in that airship, monitoring the various frequencies, is just an absolute amazing skill set and not easily acquired. But any crime in progress of violence, a burglary in progress, by a matter of policy, any type of perimeter, setting up a perimeter for a suspect, as we had this other day with this canine contact, is an airship and a supervisor. A pursuit is a supervisor, and the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department is generally all pursuits are to go into a tracking mode where the airship actually takes over the pursuit per se, in the sense of the following and tracking the individual, which allows the ground units to back away. So as the lieutenant indicated, well, you've got to put the headset on as if you're black and white. But the benefit of the air support is they cover the entire city in a matter of minutes. And when you have an area such as, say, West LA with this 50-plus square miles, the ability of them to get to the Palisades from Wilshire area is a matter of a 3-minute flight. Versus if it was a ground unit coming from just Westwood Village to get to the Palisades would be a 20 or 30-minute ordeal. An emergency basis would be still 10 to 15 minutes. So their on-site time is why they're so frequently there is frankly a matter of their airspeed and their ability to move quickly around the department. But when they're arriving in support of an officer, they're beginning to set the tactical plan. Their leadership within the organization is to set the stage and to communicate with first responders, with supervisors, to give them and point out areas of concerns, and also to de-escalate situations, both in the sense of ensuring that officers slow down, get into a right position, have the right resources before they act, and at other times saying, this is not a perimeter, this is not a search that's going to be productive because of the amount of time and distance. So they're an efficiency measure, they're an officer safety measure, and they certainly aid countless times during the course of a day in the safety of Los Angeles.
That's helpful. So to answer my question, then there isn't a specific protocol for airships. They are patrolling and responding.
I've given you some examples of specific protocols, but then we also leave it to the office, to the air support, because as a patrol unit there,
Right.
when they don't have assignments, they are given missions to do frequent patrols or oversight, whether it be the Venice Beach or it be areas that we're seeing residential 459s, areas in which we're seeing car break-ins. They're actually in eyes to look and surveil for potential, what we call proactive policing, where they'll call a unit to a scene in order to investigate a circumstance that they believe is occurring. And then lastly, they're also there from a preventive measure. The flights over my home, for instance, are done as a matter of security because of concerns about the welfare of myself and others that have had threats against their safety. So their presence there is a blanket of security, and we think that in the analysis of this, that had some ride-alongs, had some greater depth, and I think in the aftermath of this report, I'd look for the Controller's Office to have a better understanding, and us to work together to find what other means of strategies, as they identified with data capture, that we can all look to improve. But unfortunately, the way this went, we do have some makeup to do. We do have some certainty when we talk about air pollution, or we talk about the efforts of noise pollution and so forth. There are findings there that do not match up to our performance standards or the safeguards that we have in place. And I think it's incumbent upon us, A, to articulate this on a factual basis, and then secondly, now is for us to go out and bring visibility to this in a manner that's digestible.
Perfect.
Commissioner, if I could just give you another example. When the president visited about a month or 2 months ago, and we had that large demonstration at the park near the event. So that group was large, and they demonstrated, and then they started marching. Well, we were able to use the airship to actually monitor them and not have to do that with an overabundance of police officers on the ground. And we saw that they were, marching, and they gave us an understanding kind of what they wanted to do. So in that situation, the airship kind of took that mission and provided us with the information about what the group was doing and where they were going, which were not problematic, and allowed us to kind of manage everything else.
Got it. Can I ask a follow-up question? Just from my own knowledge, do we know if other departments comparable to, I mean, it's hard to be comparable to our department, but do other departments use the airships in a similar way as kind of like patrol, or are they deployed for specific reasons?
Yeah, and as the controls report identified 5 benchmark cities, which they compared to us, none of which have a program as robust as ours. They have limited in size and scope and flight hours. Absent from the controls report was the Sheriff's Department, who does have a program very comparable to ours and is in fact larger. They do most definitely utilize their airships in much the same fashion as we do. In the limited capacity that those benchmark other agencies, which were Houston, Atlanta, San Diego, Long Beach, and Pasadena, during those hours which they are in flight, they are used in much the same fashion as ours are. What we did find somewhat concerning is of the data that was contained or the inquiries that were made of those benchmark cities. We found there were some very pertinent facts that are questions that were not asked about, and we included those in our response. We did follow-up investigations with all 5 of those benchmark cities, and across the board, every one of them stated that overwhelmingly the contributions made to public safety, officer safety, and public service by air support is incalculable. Every one of them, if they had the opportunity, were provided with the budget, et cetera, to expand their programs, they would like to do so, and then that would definitely increase the level of public safety and service that is provided by their agencies.
Got it. Thank you. And then my last question is related to the need to make some improvements on our data collection. So I'm assuming that we're working to make those, or to remedy, how we collect data for like flight plans or deployments or time on, and so what are we working on?
Yes, those, and to be honest, they were 2 areas that we were aware of and have in the past made attempts at improving. Immediately, there is a recognized acknowledgement that there needs to be some consistency in the terminology and classification that is used that assists with that data analysis and data capture. And that, to a certain extent, can be assisted immediately with some internal training and familiarization and consistency, again, in those entries that are made to document the activities, and Air Support is already internally pursuing those. There is also a technological aspect to potential improvement, and those are being explored. There is currently the likelihood that the use of cellular technology moving forward within our airships could actually provide us a nexus to have an onboard mobile computer very similar to those which are utilized by our field, our ground units. And so with a few modifications and a few additional data capture points that would be customized to what Air Support does, that would perhaps provide in the future an avenue for that same system to be utilized by Air Support to allow Air Support to capture their response and handling in exactly the same manner that our ground units do, allow Air Support to create officer-initiated calls and classifications, again, in a very similar manner in which our ground units do. And I think that consistency will assist us in that kind of data capture and data analysis.
Okay, wonderful. That's good to hear. And we are we're open to sharing all the data and all the numbers with the controller and city council, right? So there's like no issue there. Okay, so that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Calanche. So again, I'd like to thank you for a very comprehensive report. I've got 2 things I'd like you to, we met previously as this was being prepared. If you would just mention the amount of resources, department personnel that went into this report so the public is aware.
Largely, several members of my staff assisted And in the review and validation, just about all the members, that would include several sergeants and a lieutenant. From Fiscal Operations Group, we had several of their civilian experts on, for instance, cap rate, et cetera, providing data, providing validation and comparison in an attempt to try and resolve the conflicts that we were finding. From our Constitutional Policing and Policy and Audit Division specifically, I had consulted with experts in auditing specifically to understand and to wrap my head around best practices in auditing, and to provide some guidance in that regards. I could easily, cumulatively, amongst all those personnel, and then of course Air Support Division themselves, pulling data and assisting with the formulation of this report, I'm very comfortable saying hundreds of hours in the aggregate.
Thank you, Commander. And I'd like to echo the Chief's comment about the fact that we do need to educate the public. As you say, we get this in a digestible format so they can read it. I think it's very concerning because there are two things that stand out to me here that were, in fact, one was brought up today during public comment. The fact that there's an assertion here that there's a health risk to the public. However, in the controller's report, there's no mention of any studies or reports that provides any source citations. That's important. And then secondly, there's an inflation of CO2 emissions by 20%. So those are things that the public should be aware of. As we try to educate them and get this information out there, I hope that those things are brought to light so people can understand that those things are not true and understand the effectiveness and efficiency it provides to our department, but to have this resource. So with that, I'm going to move that we adopt and accept the recommendation for board action. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much for your report. The commission's going to take a 10-minute recess. Let's come back at 12:05, and thank you all for being here. Okay, the commission is now back in session. We will go to agenda item 4C. The department's report relative to the confidential informant control packages audit. I've got the Administrative Sergeant and Lieutenant Gordado. Yes. Okay, the floor is yours.
Control packages audit, and this was part of the annual audit plan, 2023's annual audit plan.
Okay.
And we also have people from each of the entities that was audited in case there's questions after the presentation.
Thank you. Lieutenant?
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Inspector General. The confidential informant control packages audit was conducted by Audit Division with the purpose of determining whether or not the department followed policies and procedures with respect to proper screening and approval of confidential informants, commonly known as CIs, if contact requirements were met, and if payments to CIs were properly documented. This audit covered 5 objectives. While the department performed well in objectives 1 through 3 with compliance rates of 100% respectively, the department's compliance rate in objective 4 was greater than 99%, which dealt with completing an information contact form when a CI has been paid. The department's compliance rate in objective 5 was 96%, which dealt with having an authorized ranking officer witness the expenditure of funds form for payment to a CI. Audit Division did meet with the audit entities who are in general agreement with the audit findings. Thank you, and at this time, we avail ourselves for any questions the board may have.
Thank you. We'll start with Commissioner Calanche. Any questions or comments?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia, questions or comments?
None, thank you.
Vice President Shields.
Just one. One of the findings was relating to personnel acting in an acting position, and that there being some ambiguity as to whether or not their approval should be considered as approval, the proper level of approval. To me, it seems though if someone is operating in an acting position and they get the approval of that acting person, that it should qualify. Are there additional steps that the department needs to take to kind of solidify that so that in the future there is no ambiguity?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, as you mentioned, there were 24 instances where supervisors signed outside the threshold of their rank. They were acting, but for full transparency and objectivity reasons, we had to go by the letter of the law kind of thing on this. So we couldn't find any documentation that they were acting in an official capacity. When we checked, they said, they advised us, at that time they were acting, but we could not find any literature or verbiage saying to the fact. So we had to consider them findings. Moving forward, we did make the recommendation, and the department agrees, and we are currently implementing an expansion of the policy to include verbiage to that effect that will negate any kind of ambiguity on future acting positions.
Thank you. I welcome those types of changes to kind of solidify, or align practice and policy together so that they all seem to be running in the same direction and it's not contrary to policy. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. With that, I would move that we approve the recommendation for board action. Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll now go on to agenda item 4D. Commission Investigation Division's report, a 2023 Philanthropy report. I believe I've got Lieutenant Moffett? Okay. And Sandra Mendoza. Morning, Lieutenant. Good afternoon, Lieutenant.
Good afternoon, sir.
Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Commission. Good afternoon, Mr. Smith, Mr. T. Mr. City Attorney, and Chief Moore. Congratulations on a historic career. So I am honored. My name is Scott Moffett. I am the Commanding Officer of Commission Investigation Division. As you know, CID is a regulatory arm of the Board of Police Commissioners, and I'm honored to be here with some of my teammates. The Charitable Services section, I have Senior Management Analyst Officer in Charge Sandra Mendoza, as well as Management Analyst Ho Un, Management Analyst Sandra Paquette, Management Analyst Ken Tran, Management Assistant Dion To, and Administrative Clerk Susie Rios. So we'll take you through the annual report. I hope you've had a chance to review it. The purpose of Charitable Services section is to monitor all charities soliciting funds within the City of Los Angeles, and some of their functions are they regulate and monitor charitable activities and bingo gaming. They conduct enforcement. They're authorized to conduct audits based on charitable reports of results in bingo operations, and may also utilize our sworn members to conduct enforcement operations, since bingo is considered a gambling activity in the City of Los Angeles, as well as the state of California. And they're responsible for promotion. A part of that promotion is, of course, this report that you're reviewing that's, upon your approval, will be available to the public. That's making the general public aware of where charitable contributions are going and to avoid any deception within the charitable process. What they do specifically. So they process notice of intentions, and what a notice of intention is basically an application by a charity to solicit donations in the City of Los Angeles. They process report of results. What that is it represents the revenue that's collected by a charitable campaign or organization. And of course, some of those costs go to administration of the charity, but the goal is to get as many of those costs as possible to the actual charity that it's intended to benefit. They process commercial fundraisers, and what a commercial fundraiser is those large-scale operations, typically a door-to-door or telephonic campaign that will hire, large amounts of people to attempt to raise funds. They approve an audit endorsed agency. So in the city of LA, there's an option for a charitable campaign or charitable organization to become an endorsed agency, and they have to undergo additional scrutiny by our charitable services section, and they also have to agree that no more than 20% of their total revenue raised will go towards administration, so that at least 80% of their funds are going towards the actual charitable cause it's intended to go to. And then finally, they monitor combined charities. So combined charity is basically an umbrella organization, typically takes the form of like a payroll deduction, and it agrees to give that money to a variety of charities, usually more than 10 charities, and charge a administrative fee. So they're responsible for monitoring those combined charities. And then finally, they're also responsible, as I mentioned in the beginning, for bingo. So bingo is either recreational or what we call senior bingo, or bingo as permitted in the city of LA has to be for charitable causes. So if you're going to conduct a bingo game outside of recreation, senior bingo, the funds have to go towards a charitable organization. That's the only time bingo is permitted in the city of Los Angeles. All right. Let's see where we're at here. I think we're on the next slide. So the work they did this year. So notice of intentions received, 1,016 notice of intentions. So basically applications to conduct charitable efforts in the city. They issued 952 information cards. So that would equate to sort of a permit to go ahead and begin collecting funds. You'll notice a small discrepancy there of about 50, so about 95% compliance. Those other 50 can either be typically they get a denial if they're not in good standing with the state of California, or in some instances we get the application too late, that the event's already passed, so we're not going to approve after the events occurred. And then report of results, that's 627 report of results received. So what the report of results is once a charity conducts a fundraising effort, they have to report their success to us, and that's reviewed by generally a senior auditor or the charitable services team. Currently, the senior auditor position is vacant, but it's reviewed by the charitable services team just to ensure that they're complying with being an actual charity, as opposed to having all their revenue gobbled up by expenses, administrative expenses. So the top info cards issued were educational organizations, such as USC, for instance, if they were raising money. There's 276 information cards, so 276 either annual or individual events that occurred, and that accounted for $591.8 million in revenue generated, with an average expense ratio, and that expense ratio, as I said, is the administrative costs compared to what's actually going to the charity. So the average administrative cost for educational organizations was 14.4%. The second largest by money earned, it was actually healthcare, although it was third for information cards, but healthcare raised $591.2 million, so right behind educational organizations, and an expense ratio of 17.6%. And then the second most information cards was social service welfare organizations, only raised $55 million with an expense ratio of 21.1%. Right, and let's see. So for charitable bingo, so a percentage of fees have to be paid towards the city. A very small percentage, as you can see. Total bingo sales were $13 million. The city benefited $84,000 from those total bingo sales. As you know, the LA Police Commission has the authority to administer bingo rules. There are currently 14 regular special bingo licenses, and there are 36 active senior recreational bingo licenses. So senior, or what we call recreational bingo, there's no fee collected, and there's no administrative or no Nothing gets paid to the city, and we don't charge them for a bingo permit, but their prizes can only go up to $5, and there's a variety of other rules that apply to senior bingo. So looking ahead in the report, the challenges that we're facing. Currently, technology is one of those known challenges that we have. We only accept paper checks. And the problem with accepting paper checks is obviously we're in a digital world and people want to be able to pay online with credit cards or bank transfers, things like that. So we're working towards trying to find a vendor so that we can move that to online. And obviously we'd get more compliance that way too, since things don't get lost in the mail when they're sent online. As I mentioned earlier, we currently have a vacancy at the senior auditor position. That's difficult because clearly we deal heavily with finances and accounting. So that senior auditor, we're still working to fill that position due to the CEO imposed freeze on the department. That position, although we do have a high rate in the pipeline, they're currently unable to join our team, unfortunately. It's a transfer from another department with the city. And then another challenge we have is recently it looks like the city council is going to adjust the application fee, reduce it from $60 down to $42. So that we anticipate an annual revenue of $32,500 estimated. So clearly that's not full cost recovery. Our section costs a lot more than $32,000 a year to operate. And finally, with outreach, we have the Give Wisely campaign and public awareness. The charitable section is tasked with doing both public awareness as well as educating charities on their obligations when they're operating within the city of LA. Upcoming this year, the staff's looking to develop a webinar series for the summer, early fall as part of our annual Give Wisely campaign. And the team has been working more recently with other state agencies. As you noticed earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that we've had about 1,000 applications. We know full well that the mountain's much bigger in the city of Los Angeles. There's well more than 1,000 organizations soliciting funds in the city of Los Angeles. So we're trying to team up with the state where they're a little bit better with registering with the state, but there's got to be 5,000 to 10,000 more charities out there that are not properly registered. So we have our work cut out for us. And finally, I'm just going to leave some tips for the public or for the commissioners if you're thinking about giving to one of your favorite charities. Some recommendations. So evaluate the charity that you're considering. Legitimate charities will be upfront and encourage investigation. There's plenty of online tools to help in that evaluation, and tax forms are available publicly through the IRS for any legitimate charitable organization. You can always go online at the IRS and view their tax forms. Make a plan. Decide what issues are most important to you and which charity best addresses your concerns. And avoid spontaneous cash gifts. Fraudulent charities rely on impulsive gifts. Instead, use credit card or send checks through a trusted online portal or known address so that your funds can be tracked. And with that, I have nothing further. If the board has any questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
We'll go to Commissioner Kalanche first for questions or comments.
Thank you. These are kind of general. When did we start? Well, one is, do other cities collect or have a similar process of like a charitable charity registration? Yeah. So do other cities have this type of regulatory body for charities? And also, like, what is the cost to us? Because I know, like, the revenue that we bring in is much more, it's way less than what it probably costs us. So, like, what is the approximate cost to regulate these charities?
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, commissioners. So I can only touch a little bit on it. I know that LA County also has a process, and there are 88 cities in the county. We haven't checked other counties or other major cities. I'm not sure. I believe San Francisco may also, but I can follow up with some of that information. In terms of cost recovery, or the cost of the program, we operate under the LAMC and by ordinance, so it's required. I am not involved in the budget process, so I couldn't speak to it.
So it's part of municipal code, yeah.
Commissioner. The fees that are set are based on the people that are working and the time and motion that they do. So annually, we do a time and motion study, and there's a cost allocation plan or cap rate. You'll hear that number. And while their time may be the same each year, the cost allocation plan will fluctuate. That's based on a benefit rate. So this year, the reduction that took place in the fee was because of reduction in the cost allocation plan. All of our police permit fees this year, with the exception of a few, went down. That doesn't mean the work was less. The cost allocation fee went down. The salary rate remained the same. Now, next year, we'll do an evaluation, and there'll be a new cost allocation plan. So that's the way the fee is set. And the fee is minimal for what we receive in this area.
So I guess my question is like, what is the cost to the department?
The cost of the department would be the people doing the work, which would be the 5 members staffing that unit. I'm going to take a wild guess, would probably be between $500,000 and $600,000.
I was going to say like probably like 100 times of what from the fees.
Exactly, but that gets offset by our police permit fees, which generate close to $8 million a year. Our OPG revenue from official police garages is close to $12 to $13 million a year. Our false alarm revenue is close to $8 to $9 million a year.
Got it.
Commission investigation and the commission are the only cost centers in LAPD that generate money. And those are the 3 areas that the vast revenue come in from. As to the regulation of charitable giving, you see the kind of money that is raised. And I think to ensure that the city is being treated fairly, that the people who are giving money are being treated fairly, I think the commitment of our staff is appropriate. The other interesting piece is, years ago, there used to be a social service agency in the city of LA. When that agency was done away with, this responsibility was transferred to Commission Investigation Division. That's how it landed here.
Got it. I'm just curious because having run a nonprofit, there's so many other places, you gotta register with the Attorney General's office, the Secretary of State. You gotta report your earnings through your 990s, and it gets posted in both those. So I'm just wondering, like, if it's even I'm sure you guys do amazing work, but is it something that we need to do? Just a question.
Right, so it is required under the municipal code
Yes,
to register. Some of the advantages to charities, obviously there's a lot of awareness, and there are a lot of hoops to jump through, so to speak, because you have to go to the IRS and you have to be designated as a 501c3, and then you got to go to the or the state of California, DOJ, and everything else. But it adds legitimacy to the charities. Because
I agree.
The problem is there's a lot of fraudsters that unfortunately have created an environment where there's a great deal of regulation, and that's kind of the point for the charities that may be out there listening. Is it's important to register because it adds legitimacy to the process, and it's something that the citizens deserve to know that they can go online and verify that they're eligible.
I totally agree with you. I do, and I know the work that you do is really important and very thorough. I was just asking because if we're operating at a loss, is it something that, but I see that it's municipal code, but just a question about the need for,
Right, and of course, I would imagine the city and the department are very supportive of charitable giving in the city of Los Angeles. So the city obviously absorbs some of that cost that's associated there. As I indicated, there's also bingo fees that account for some of our cost recovery. But in addition, occasionally, rarely, but occasionally, we do actually need a badge to go into places and ensure that things are happening. So that's why we have our
No, I
enforcement
could see like
section.
you can go, okay. Those are just questions. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
The next time you get a solicitation in the mail from one of the more large organizations, you'll see a small piece of white paper that's about 4 inches by 3 inches. If you look very close at the printing, you'll see Lieutenant Smoffat's signature on it. That's the notice of information to solicit. Regardless of where you live, if you're somewhere where that mail gets sent, you'll have that LA notice of certification.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you for the presentation. On the report, just some feedback if it still applies or for a future iteration of this report. Page 11, the charitable activity circle that we have there, it has the council districts divided up by colors, and it has the percentage labels on it, but not the actual council district labels. on that sheet, and I'm a little colorblind because all those colors look the same. So that sheet, you know, the breakdown of CD by color doesn't help.
So add count.
If the
not
CD,
to
if the
sell.
council district can be put on the actual circle, that would be lovely.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Vice President Shields.
Thank you. And I had some of the same kind of concerns that Commissioner Calanche has raised in terms of, is there some redundancy that is happening that, again, given our outstretched resources, is there something that can be done, especially if the LA County is doing something similar and we fall within the county? The one question I have is really what is the consequence for organizations not complying, right? In terms of if someone does not get a notice of intention, what happens? And then for the organizations that did get information cards but never actually filed a report of results, what happens? Because I think unless there's really teeth to the program, you're only policing the organizations that are voluntarily complying with the program.
Right, I hear what you're saying. What happens is they get a stern warning letter, but we do have the ability to actually cite them because they're violating the municipal code, which can result in administrative citation, which is generally a fine that's worked out through the city attorney's office. So if there is a violation, the enforcement component of CID can go out. Generally, we deal primarily with permits, and specific to bingo, of course, because bingo is actual gambling. But if necessary, and it generally doesn't come to that because one of the advantages of the low fees that are involved is that they're not particularly cost prohibitive. When you're talking about police permits in general, some of those can be $900. So that's an expensive permit. To register your charity is $60. It's soon going to be $42. So most people don't see that as being something they're going to refuse if they get a letter from the police department saying you owe money or you need to submit a report. But if we ultimately had to, we do have the ability to go out, send officers out and cite the charity if needed.
And do we make any effort to identify ones that are in violation, or say someone applies for it and then you find out that they're not in good standing, therefore they cannot get, one of these, but then they continue to still operate? Like what happens? How do we escalate kind of the penalties?
So at this point, we're largely, and we're still working towards coming up with better solutions, but at this point, it's largely just a letter, and we haven't been doing too much else because there is significant time, as Mr. Chiefing, there's significant time and motion involved in actually going to hunt down these charities, especially if they're out of state. I mean, we're not going to put officers on a plane to Washington, D.C. To go deal with some sort of federal claim. So a lot of it is, it comes down to that legitimacy of the organization. Hopefully in the coming year or so, we'll be able to report those that are delinquent so that the public can be warned. I mean, that's perhaps probably our strongest sort of influence that we can put on them is whether or not people want to give to their charity.
Thank you. The other commissioners addressed my comments or questions. I just have a couple. On the senior auditor, you have someone in the pipeline. We're just waiting for the freeze to...
Yes, sir. So we hired a gentleman back in, I believe it was December, right? In December. He's with another city department. Of course, when you join the police department, there's a background check that occurs. So it's my understanding that he has cleared, and of course all this is confidential to me, so I can only do my best guess, but I believe that he has cleared the background, and we're just frozen because of the CAO is looking to make sure that every position is essential. I can't stress enough that this is essential because we are dealing with auditing numbers, that we don't have the capability, the financial background to do what an auditor can do.
Okay. And the second question is, you mentioned, and so did Vice President Shields, the charity's not registered, and you said you may be partnering with the state. Is there a strategy to sort of get our arms around those people that are outstanding?
So eventually, the state was able to provide us with a massive list of everybody that's operating in the city of Los Angeles that's registered with the state. Now, I mean, obviously, keep in mind that everyone registers with the state, just like everyone doesn't register with the IRS. So we're going to start comparing that list. We're going to do massive mailings and try to get as many as possible in compliance. I would say by far the biggest takeaway to the general public is, do your homework. Feel free to contact us. We can certainly tell you if they're properly registered with us. I think it goes significantly to the legitimacy of the charity.
So then the last question I have to ask it, have we ever fined anyone?
I am not aware, since I've been at Commission Investigation Division for 2 years, outside of bingo, I am not aware of us even getting to the point where we've sent officers to a charity to initiate the fine process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
I think another challenge, and this just points to the challenge of your job. Another challenge is that everybody's fundraising online, right? Like you click on someone's website and it's like donate. So then obviously they're not registering, their website so it's a very challenging endeavor that you have. But I just wanted to point that out.
Right, I agree with you, and it's particularly challenging because there are certain charities, like Friends of the Library or these smaller charities that are only raising a few $100s a year, but they're actually following all the rules. So it's unfortunate one of these bigger ones, especially the ones that are operating fully online and have become a conglomerate, are not doing their due diligence as far as registering with
I think another opportunity, since we're talking about this, and I come from that world, the nonprofit world, and having to fundraise, as a nonprofit, you also have to register with the city's Office of Finance. It might even make more sense to have a one-time, because everybody's fundraising every day, right? And I know the little white papers are usually when people do a big gala, but everybody's fundraising for these nonprofits, you have to fundraise all the time. So an opportunity could be just to do, and I know we're going up against municipal code, so I don't even, the things that I'm saying may not even be doable, but having every single charity, just like the state does, register once a year. Every single charity should register once a year, and then you probably get 10,000 charities that have to register to operate in the city of LA, just like you have to pay your permits to operate in the city of LA as a physical, location, right? It's just an opportunity to think about, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Calanche. So Lieutenant, thank you very much, Ms. Mendoza, and to your staff, all the incredible work you do. We really appreciate it. Just incredible report and very well done. So with that, I'm going to move that we approve the recommendation for board action. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you all.
Thank you.
The commission will now recess into closed session. Thank you.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54956.
The meeting will resume. We have completed closed session. We'll have a report from the Executive Director, Mr. Tiefang.
Commission adjudicated item 5A1, officer-involved shooting number 011-23, adopting the chief's recommendations on a 3-0 vote. Those recommendations were tactics, tactical debrief, 1 Captain 3, 1 Detective 3, 3 Police Officer 3s, and 1 Police Officer 2. Administrative disapproval on tactics, 1 Lieutenant 2, 2 Sergeant 2s, 2 Police Officer 3s plus 1, and 2 Police Officer 3s. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 2 Police Officer 3 plus 1, 5 Police Officer 3s, 1 Police Officer 2. Lethal use of force in policy, 2 Police Officer 3s. Out of policy, administrative disapproval, 2 Police Officer 3 plus 1, and 3 Police Officer 3s. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Tiefang. And with that, I would move that we adjourn today's meeting. Is there a second?
I second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.